Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this last day of the June board meeting. Thank you very much for the very good discussions over the last 3 days, which should, in some of the sessions this morning, should feed the conversation that we will still need to have. I hope that you had a nice evening yesterday. Some of us were at the CFO event. Some of us were not, but I hope that all of you are rested and prepared for these final conversations that we'll have today. We will start the morning with a session on the SMART, an update from the team working on this framework, telling you what the progress that has been made in bringing SMART to life, the first experiences, and what they plan to do over the next few times. This is a framework, just to recall, that we created to make sure that we work it's about better work, better results, better engagement, better response, better adoption. It's not a project. It's really a framework that we are starting to bring to life. We saw it yesterday with the CFO project, that it's starting to allow kind of assessment of the way we are working against the main pillars and the main objectives of the SMART framework. So yes, with this, I will turn to Rui, who will present on the SMART developments. Thank you, Rui and team.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all. Welcome. So I'll be very brief and before passing it on to Carla, but just reminding you a bit what we've been doing around SMART. So, well, first maybe telling you or sharing with you that this has been quite a challenging, but also a very fulfilling experience from our side, and just highlighting, let's say, the types of thoughts and challenges that we are facing when developing this. This is really about, on one hand, changing the way we think and work in developing our projects, and on the other hand, just promote initiatives that either support that way of thinking and working, or really focus on capacity building, let it be individual or from an organizational standpoint. We really feel it. We've talked about in the last few days a lot about transformation and innovation, and that's a bit our ambition, let's say, that the project can actually contribute to transformation and innovation of the IESBA way of working, always with this objective of creating impact and delivering better service in the public interest to the market. With this, just sharing with you a bit the way we've been working, we've adopted, you might recall from our last presentation, we've adopted kind of a project management framework to way we organize work. So Carla, Joanne, and I, we are kind of the coordinators, I would call it like this. But then really the effort and the work that you'll see here, I think I can say that it has involved every team member at IESBA at different levels and different occasions, but this has been really a joint effort, and one that requires quite a lot of let's say, challenging of our own way of working in different levels, and I think you'll see it when we go to the presentation. With this, I would pass it on to Carla to guide us through the presentation and explain a bit what we'll discuss in the next hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Rui. Good morning, everyone. So as Rui mentioned, that we've been very busy taking the design to implementation at the staff level. So the agenda that you see in front of you, it's what we plan to present to you today. It'll be structured into 2 streams. The first stream will focus on the pilots and embedding SMART pillars in the initiatives of role of CFOs and PRRs, followed by stream 2's initiatives that are ready for rollout and initiatives that have concluded and already implemented in the way we work, and you'll be able to see evidence of that as we go through a presentation. So the key message today is like SMART has become operational. It is beginning to influence how the staff team work and design our engagements with stakeholders, capture that feedback, communicate back those feedback, and support future adoption implementation. So this slide talks about the two different streams, as I mentioned. Stream one, really, it's about behavioral and operational change. The objective is to make sure that initiatives systematically apply the SMART pillar fast track core actions while also using the pilot experience to improve the framework over time. So it is a test drive right now. We're trying to get it right, but obviously we do need feedback from staff team as well as board members and your experience as we pilot these initiatives. For Stream 2, it's about institutional capability, and it focuses on tools and initiatives that need to make SMART easier to apply consistently throughout the work that we undertake. So the objective is to design and implement targeted initiatives that operationalize the SMART objectives and to align with the core framework actions and framework. So let me kick off with embedding SMART for role of CFO. We've heard from me yesterday, the update I provided on the SMART actions that we've undertaken and the impact that we've seen with the work that we've done. So I won't go too much into detail what was mentioned yesterday, but I'd like to mention that using SMART to guide the work of the project team, it has enabled us to think and prioritize and triage actions that are priorities. So there's no one action that precedes the other. We feel that all the actions we've undertaken help us get to the place that we needed to get to yesterday, which landed quite well because while it also meant that we've undertaken a lot of work, it also meant that we managed to do immense outreach and be able to convey the messages and narratives that we needed for this initiative, especially distilling the right messaging, what the initiative is about and what it's not about. So with that, I'll pass it on to Jeff, who'll speak a little bit more on PRRs.
Thank you, Carla, and good morning, everybody. So the two PIR project teams led by Cam and myself, we have looked at SMART. We are in a slightly different journey with the CFO teams because, as you would appreciate, when this came in, the surveys were sent out in January. So what we've done is the two teams have got together and started to think through the 5 SMART pillars. And so we have some initial thoughts on how we're going to progress, in the next month or so as the survey responses come back. What I would say is that in terms of our experience is that, we were able to look at the SMART framework. And then we look at, just to help us to think about how we can be more efficient, how we can be more impactful, how we can be more transparent, perhaps in a more, I would say, in a more disciplined and systematic way. So that's what we've done. And so from that sort of experience, and we discuss also with the SMART staff team as well, and we've come up with a few at this stage, a few action items that help us kind of make sure these PIR work streams, as we conduct it fits within our SMART framework. So you see that, we have a few different things, 4 different things at this stage, developing a PR plan that's based on, agreements from the board from the previous meetings on the PRR work streams, and that kind of fits into simplification. And then we have a few other things, the stakeholder engagement comms plans. Some of these things are things that we would ordinarily do. But I think, like I said before, the SMART framework really help us to really kind of be much more disciplined in thinking through these things. So the engagement comms plan, we feel that fits into mobilization and targeted actions, and making sure that our report is structured in a way that's clear, and recommendations supported by clear rationale. Again, we see that it fits under the simplification and responsiveness pillars. And the last one, of course, with the PIRs, because the nature of these work streams is looking at, whether the standards have met its objectives. We would, of course, work very closely with the A&I working group. And of course, that fit nicely in a more narrow sense of the adoption pillar. So that's all we've come up with for now, and these are things that we'll work on. But of course, as we walk through the whole, as we continue on with these work streams, we will continue to apply smart work with the smart project team as well. Thanks, Carla. Oh, sorry, I should ask if Cam has any additional comments.
Thank you, Jeff. So in summary, for stream number one, the two initiatives that are being piloted, to sum it up, what are the key impacts and what's happening differently because of SMART? And it is the question the project teams have always asked themselves as they go on to implement the SMART pillars in the way they do, the way we work. And it's about changing the methods so that the outputs that we're producing are clearer, more targeted, more responsive, and more decision useful. So for example, on the simplification pillar, for both of the pilots, the anchor documents are helping teams structure our executive summaries, agendas, board papers, and also non-technical explanation documents that we share with our stakeholders. On mobilization, as Jeff and myself have shared, that the stakeholder mapping and engagement are becoming more directly linked, especially to any risk that we identify throughout the process of carrying out those initiatives, any evidence gap that we needed to explore further, and the intended stakeholders that we needed to reach out to. So it does reduce the risk of relying only the easiest form or most familiar form of stakeholder channels that we usually engage with. On responsiveness, definitely the clearest and most apparent way of working that has changed is we've adjusted our feedback loop. I'm not saying that what we had before did not work, but we definitely have been more intentional in terms of messaging our communication with the stakeholders that we're approaching. So for example, if we're writing an email or a briefing note for an investor, we make sure that we actually adjust the briefing note to tailor to their understanding on the landscape and what appeals to them and why ethics is important to an investor. On targeted action, it's also about different engagement approaches that are being tested, including more tailored outreach format and dialogues. And as I mentioned yesterday, adoption, it varies by life cycle. For example, in the CFO workstream, there's no final output and there's no standard. It's not a standard setting project. So the relevant question for the role CFO initiative is, in terms of adoption, whether the evidence base is strong enough to support any future decision that the board will need to undertake in the September meeting. So perhaps I think it's a good time I'll pause here and gather feedback from the board. If you are, do you have any questions in terms of the update that's been provided, for example, the raw CFO project yesterday, as well as the update we've done so far this morning?
Thank you very much, Carla and Kui. The floor is open for comments, questions, considerations, feelings about what has been presented with respect to the impact that SMART is already having, how you feel it. Vanya, please.
I'd like to congratulate the team for SMART because this is exactly the kind of simplification, the improvement in communication that we were discussing yesterday. And the result is already perceptive for all of us and a huge improvement. And definitely it makes our job as board members easier to read the documentation that are being presented since we started. So I'm very happy with that.
Thank you very much, Vanya. Obichuku? I think you're muted, Obi. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. Well, Obi, if you don't mind, I'm going to give the floor to another board member while you and I don't know, here the team, see if you can solve the issue, because I know that we are having issues today. You will have noted that the camera is not working and the ones who are speaking are not being pinpointed on the screens. So maybe there is something. So I'm going to give the floor to David Ray and then come back to you, okay? David, please.
Thank you, Chair. So maybe a question for the team around the smart, because I know we talked about this in the context of the CFO project. What have you experienced, and maybe it's like early question as well for the PIR team, what have you seen that perhaps had a bit more friction than was helpful in its strict application? So are there areas, for example, that we think we can improve and make them perhaps even more helpful, or perhaps a little bit less challenging to apply in practice, is my question. Thank you.
Happy to answer that. And John, please chime in if you have any comments for role of CFO initiative. Personally, I did not experience any friction in implementing SMART for role of CFO. In fact, it actually made the project team more intentional in our outreach with stakeholders, which has been received with tremendous support. And the way we've communicated to them and speaking their language was very important. We don't go to them with sections of the code and say, do you understand what this requires you to? But in fact, we've turned around and adjusted the language to make sure that they understand why and what they're doing has an ethical dimension element to them. It's not just an operational business risk. It is very important to understand what they're doing has an ethical aspect to it. And this is where and how our board can support the work that they undertake. So that's one most obvious change that I've seen in terms of impact on our stakeholders. So I'll see John has anything else to add.
Let me just maybe share a bit of a thought from our experience, kind of coordinating. I would say for us the most challenging is this. It's really on the embedding smart. So working with the CFO project and the PIRs. Why? Because every time we're trying to change things, this requires kind of really thinking, what am I doing? So, and for instance, what is adoption? That was a point that was raised. What is adoption in a project since its start, right? We know what is adoption once we have a standard and we want it to be implemented. But what does that mean over the life cycle of a project, for instance? So that thinking on how are we doing and actually trying to get smart in the different parts of the cycle of the development cycle, I think for us, it's still, I would say, where we're learning more. Another part, and that's maybe a question for the board, and of course, if there's no answer, we'll just assume it is okay. That is the way we provide information to the boards. So what we've tried with the CFO project is essentially to distill the most important messages, including it in the paper, in the beginning, let's say, some key ideas of what was achieved, and then put as an annex a more thorough, extended, let's say, descriptions of the findings. And as we move forward, we would like probably adopt this in the several projects. And of course, the board has to just, if it is not, let's say, clear enough or helpful, we would very much need the feedback.
Thank you, Rui and Carla. Obi, should we try again? No. Yeah, still not listening to you. I'm sorry. Asked you.
Okay.
Do you
It's working now.
Is it our problem or?
It's working
It's
now.
working. Okay.
Yes. Thank you. It was saying that I couldn't unmute. Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to ask a question. I don't know, maybe I just want the SMART framework. Is it possible for it to be applied across board instead of being project specific? Because from what I can see, I can see that there's a tendency that if it's project specific, it can lead to some overlapping activities being done. So I'm wondering if it can be applied across board, as in across the whole strategy work plan we have, so that we eliminate overlaps. Then I also appreciate the SMART framework. I could see easily how it will help improve our work in the A&I group. And also, I also have a question on the adoption pillar. There was a mention that it doesn't really apply as at now, but I'm thinking that the adoption should be applicable for whether at any life cycle, because since we already have a code, any project we're going to, we should have it in mind to use that opportunity to find out how our adoption, how the code is being adopted. For example, the CFO, that place could have been used, that pillar could have supported the post-implementation review on the structure of the code and the knuckle for CF4 PAIBAs, PAIBS. So you can supported that, and you can use that to check how it has been implemented, whether it has been adopted, and the implementation challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abi. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. Back to the team.
Thank you, Gabriela. So next we'll move on to, excuse me, to stream number 2 on institutional capability. Stream 2 is about building the tools and template and internal infrastructure that makes SMART easier to apply consistently throughout the work that we undertake. And the distinction is actually quite important. We do not rely on each team to reinvent its own approach to implementation support, mobilization tracking, but instead it's meant to have a consistent approach and give teams practical tools that can be adopted by initiative and project type, the risk and the life cycle stage. So as Rui mentioned, SMART initiative has involved all the staff team, and that's why you see a few of us here on table today. For the next few slides, we'll be discussing ones that are ready to roll out. And Hans, we have Elaine and Sylvia here with me today, and I'll pass it on to them for the next presentation.
Hi, thank you very much. So one of the SMART initiatives that I was working on here is a implementation aid checklist, or kind of a checklist with options. And what we wanted to use this as was sort of a roadmap or options, or just things to consider, because one of the things we were thinking as we're going through projects is that, to take a step back, and not every project will have the same elements or the same needs, but we thought it was to help with consistency in how we approach the projects, or to go through and say, have we thought of everything that might be needed for this project, and can we select certain things that we might want to do, and then once we have some commonalities. So for example, if this project needs an FAQ, we know that there's a bank of FAQs and this is how they're written, et cetera. Or if there's a webinar that needs to be done. So you kind of have a better sense of maybe why we're doing certain things as well. So if something's not applicable, we look at it, we say, what, this isn't the type of project that needs, say, external educational research, or, a roundtable or a focus group. But having all of those options in one place for us to just think about as we're going through the projects and in different phases of the project is what this is intended to do.
So the next one is the mobilization analytics dashboard. So the intent was really to develop a tool or a document that would help the board to interpret or to have an understanding of the outreach or the communication with the different stakeholders group, and just to really see the impact of the specific project. And I think this is really an important tool, that it would help the boards to understand whether there is a need to further communication with a specific stakeholder group. As we know, each and every project requires communication with different stakeholders. So for example, the CFOs, with the preppers and so on. But it would really help the board to understand that whether we had the necessary or the important communication with the SMPs or the users. And it could really inform the board's decision on the outreach and the strategic priorities with respect to a specific project. And it doesn't mean that we are not doing that already. So we are reporting back to the board on the outreach or roundtables, but at the moment there isn't a tool that would help to the board to have a snapshot of what's happening with one of the projects or at the project level. So the plan is that the project team would keep a template, possibly in Excel, that would include the necessary information. And whenever there is a communication to the board on the specific project, they could draw this information and present it in an attachment or as part of the board paper. So when the board is reading the documents, they would know that where are we with the communication with the different stakeholders group. And we didn't want to make it really difficult. As you can see on the slide, that's really the dashboard we are proposing for maintaining this kind of information. So there would be some information on what was the type of the communication, that it was an outreach, an article, and where, how many stakeholders, and also when it is possible to provide the number of the specific stakeholder group. So it's really just a template. Of course, maybe we can include further information. But what I would like to emphasize that although it will be on the project team to maintain this tool, but we would really need the input from the board members. So whenever there is an outreach or whenever there is an article, we would like to have this information, or if you can send this information to the project team so we can enter this into this specific tool. And again, whenever there is a board discussion on the specific project, you will get the output from this tool, and you would understand whether the project was communicated with SMPs or the firms, and would help the discussion with respect to this specific project.
Thank you, Sylvia. And next, we'll move on to initiatives that's concluded. There's been a few initiatives that were undertaken in the last quarter. If you're thinking that the project teams didn't have enough to do, we actually had a lot done last quarter. So be able to present to you some of it that's been concluded. So I'll pass it on to John for ANI.
Thank you, Carla. So yeah, these three initiatives are squarely aligned with adoption and implementation. So I'll just briefly explain what the three initiatives relate to, and then what's being done in between June to December, and then the plan for December. So the partnership plan, so this is supported by the ANI partnership framework, it's there to provide a structured approach to ANI focused on engagement with PAOs, regulators, and other aligned institutions. So as you're aware, as we've already spoken about this week, we've done that first part of the process where we prioritised 8 potential partnerships, which will now go into the onboarding aspects of that. And the idea also is to then, by the December board meeting, prepare a updated plan for 2027. So obviously this will need to involve a lot of discussions with the ANI working group to ascertain what we want to take forward in terms of that partnership plan. The second one is the jurisdictional and stakeholder matrix. So the idea behind this is to create a structured database of jurisdictions and stakeholders characterised by influence, region, and engagement history, so as to support prioritisation. This actually relates back to the discussion we had around IFAC and the data as well. We see there's a good opportunity to, like we've mentioned about that, to get involved in that process around the data that they are planning to obtain from jurisdictions and PAOs, and to also supplement that with our own information that is relevant for us in terms of prioritisation for adoption plans, and the partnership plan as well. So the plan for the next 6 months is, like we were talking about when we had the ANI session, is to work very closely with IFAC within the next 6 months as they're going through that process And again, to develop a plan for 2027 in terms of what additional work needs to be done in relation to that side of things. And then the third one is the adoption plan, which is around defining a prioritised roadmap for jurisdictions, supported by detailed profiles covering like adoption status, local developments, the landscape and nuances relation to particular jurisdictions. So as you know, we've been doing that with the sustainability side of things, and we've been developing those profiles for 24 jurisdictions at this point. But again, we'll need to work very closely with the ANI working group to work out what the plan is for 2027. As you know, we've been focusing on sustainability, and we need to work out what the next stage or the next phase of that work will be. And again, we'll provide a report or an update around that plan at the December board meeting. We see these three as very much interrelated, because if we get the jurisdiction and stakeholder matrix right and have the right data and the right information, that will clearly inform what we want to do in relation to the adoption plan in particular, because we'll have that specificities about where jurisdictions are at in the adoption process, etc. But it'll also help to inform the partnership plan. And then, I guess in a converse manner, if you think about the partnership plan and the adoption plan, the information and data that we need for those will inform how we develop the jurisdictional and stakeholder matrix. So yeah, as I said, we're working on those matters already and through to December, but then the plan is to update the board in December in terms of what we want to focus on in 2027.
Thank you. So it's my turn. Let me guide you now a bit through initiatives that have been concluded and that I think can be of some interest to the board. One is this key messaging repository. So what we've been trying to do is essentially distill messages that can support and align our let's say positioning and thinking. That has kind of two work streams, I would say. One is the snapshots, and I'll come to that in a minute, that we've been developing and putting forward, trying to explain in plain English what we're doing. The other one is this key messaging repository, which is an internal tool for us to align the messaging whenever we need to prepare communications. So this is, of course, very relevant to us in the staff and supporting our external communication. But when board members prepare their interventions, the staff can also help them with providing, let's say, the key messaging that we have been sharing on the topics at this point. We have 3 of these messaging repositories updated, ready to use. One is on sustainability, which is essentially the messaging from last year. So it will be updated just after summer to let's say, prepare for the effective date in December. Another one is technology, which we are sharing here that it was updated on the 10th of March, but this is no longer updated. So there's a new version now already updated last week. And the other one is on IESBA work plan and priorities. And we are working on two other key messaging to include there. So this is one of the smart initiatives, one of the 15 smart initiatives that we have considered here as concluded. Of course, this is an ongoing process and never-ending process, I would say. Second point. Can I have the controller? The second point here, I will pass. Sorry. This is essentially just to highlight that the Insights staff team, which was one of the 15 initiatives, is operationalized now at this point, and you got all the updates yesterday. So this team at this point essentially provides the team support to the TRC, and so I won't spend time in this. We have also developed together with an ANI team, sorry, what we are calling a high-level communication and stakeholder engagement plan. So this goes from now until December with the key, what we consider to be the key initiatives to be developed, let's say in a coordinated, or at least with a full visibility, internal visibility on our work. I won't go into the details here, other than saying that where we will be spending resources this year, or where we plan to spend resources this year in terms of this communication and stakeholder engagement activities, is our overall working strategy. Small and medium practices, FCG, technology, and sustainability adoption and implementation. I would like now to come back to this slide here. So we've done quite a lot on communications, and I would like to guide you through some of the changes. So we will be having an updated social media visual. You'll see it coming in the next weeks. So we are starting just to roll it out since last week. We have a new IESBA about page that explains what we do, and also including a video there. And we have some other changes. I would like to guide you through this just very briefly to get to a sense, and then connect that a bit more directly to the SMART. Let me just sorry. I think I need someone to allow me to take the screen, please. Okay, so here we are. So why things that we would like to highlight. So connecting a bit to this idea of SMART, what have we been trying to do? Two things I'll show you today. One is these changes to the website, which includes, by the way, also a new focus area on technology. And you'll see also published just this morning a new snapshot on IESBA's approach to technology. What we've been trying to do, and I'll go through the let's say the 5 pillars. Essentially, it's an effort of simplifying messages, and you'll see it, for instance, on how we present ourselves just up here. If you recall, we would have 4 lines with trademarks and a lot of text here explaining what we do. We've changed that. And I would highlight also in this idea of simplifying messages on the key, let's say, or at least a strong message that we are putting forward on technology, which is a 3-pillar approach to technology. So essentially, the changes we did to the code, which we believe are fit for purpose. The other one is providing ongoing and permanent monitoring through the technology experts group and other monitoring activities. And the 3rd pillar, which is essentially providing support and the development of NUMs. This idea of a 3-pillar approach is now very much into the way we are framing the work that we do, giving it, let's say, a sense of hopefully a better helping stakeholders understand a bit more the way we are thinking and approaching technology. On mobilization, we have been very much focused on calls to action and engagement. You'll see that through the small changes in the website, for instance, when you'll start seeing here, follow us, and all these buttons to try to call or invite stakeholders to engage with us. But I would also like to highlight the FCG newsletter. So the FCG newsletter, which we published in February, has now over 5,000 subscribers. It will likely evolve to a IESBA newsletter in the coming months. That allowed us to engage directly, and because in the last days or in some discussions we have been a bit focused on, let's say, pressures, or at least less positive feedback to our work. And I would say that we also have quite positive feedback to our work and engagement in several other examples. And through the newsletter, for instance, we did engage and promote, let's say, our thinking or intentions or let's say the constructive approach to FCG, engaging directly with the OECD, the Financial Stability Board, medium and large firm, the ACGN, additional 4 firms that shared good practices on what they do on FCG. So I would say a very positive approach to the way we relate with the stakeholders and to those that we hope to be able to help. So I would like to also highlight in terms of mobilization. On adoption, again, this ideas of call to action, but I would highlight the proportionality document that we've published. It is really a document designed to bridge, let's say, our technical effort to the understanding that stakeholders have of what we do. On responsiveness, I would like to highlight one point that Carla and the CFO team did not highlight here in the presentation, but it has been echoing to me since they shared it with me. That is, they went through all these roundtables and they did provide a feedback to their stakeholders, I would say in less than 48 hours. These are small things that really, I would say, show that I think it was someone, Christelle, at some point mentioned this idea of walk the talk. And I think this is what walking the talk. These are small actions that really show that we mean it when we want to engage with the stakeholders we relate to. And on targeted action, again, the SMPs document, I would highlight that, and the technology work. So this just to give you a sense of the work that we've been doing. On the about IESBA, let me just show here. So I've highlighted some parts on the home page. Here, hopefully one thing that we've been noticing and that this has been in the making for quite a few months now, is that it is not clear to everyone what we do, why we do it, how we do it. Probably there are still, surely, and from the conversations yesterday, some ideas came up here on things that we can still do better, namely explain what is the standard setting process, for instance. But now in this about IESBA, I think we get a much better sense of what we do, how we do it, how we are organized, are we independent or not, where does our funding come. It actually has the milestones of the development of the code in the last 20 years. So I think someone that comes here, I think, can get a good sense of our, let's say, activities, and it does show that we want to engage in a more clear way, transparent way with our stakeholders. And just something new from this morning, we did update the focus area on technology. So if you go to the focus area on technology, you will now see a new focus area that again focuses essentially on all the new work and the immense effort that the technology team is putting forward to on one hand, as I say, the 3-pillar approach. So on one hand, make it clear why the code is fit for purpose. On the other hand, make sure that we are really screening the world outside to understand what is happening. And on the 3rd pillar, really focusing on providing support through NAMs. And you'll see it through the focus area, I would say, manifestations of this 3-pillar approach through all the technology process. And of course, we would invite you to take a look at the snapshot, which essentially hopefully will explain in a clear way to stakeholders what we have been doing, and not only what we have been doing, but actually what we will do also. So how do we view this? To finish on this part, I would say that again, on the getting feedback from stakeholders, so this really creating an impact requires a lot of communication, but communication in a 2-way street. Let's say it's actually communicating, but really listening to what we're hearing. And I would just like to highlight again that we do listen very carefully to all the criticisms, which are very, I would say, helpful to help us do better. But I would also highlight that we do get positive feedback on the work that we've been doing. And just to highlight in the very recent experiences, both EFAA with that proportionality document, or just the engagement with IOSCO C1 committee. All that was very constructive feedback for the work we do and the impact that we may have. And just sharing with you that even from a broader perspective in terms of stakeholder management, in the last quarter, we, without doing anything, were approached both by the New York University to try to develop, participate in a project that they have with their students focused on IESBA work. They came to us. And Kaplan, which is an educational services in the accounting, not only the accounting center, financial sector, came to us and invited us to a partnership with them in a specific project to explain what IESBA is doing, what its approach to technology, its approach to firm culture and governance. So just saying that there are results, I would say, that we see around of the effort that the board is doing and in explaining, let's say, our deep commitment to the public interest and to serve the accountant professional, and I would say more broadly, the financial sector. So this is what I would like to share with you at this point. Can we go back to the presentation? Sorry, I'm not sure. I have to stop sharing, right? Should I share the presentation myself? Okay. Okay, so again, this was one of the initiatives that we had in the SMART framework, the comms procedures, language and visual style guides. That is essentially concluded also. So we've had two initiatives, just to summing up, two initiatives that are ready to roll out. You'll see it, the results of those initiatives coming up in the future board papers. The mobilization aid checklist, which supports the team to really kind of, when thinking about a project, so if I have to do implementation activities, what is the, let's say, the full set of possibilities that I have in front of me? And the other one is this mobilization analytics. We cannot speak so much about mobilization without trying to have at least some kind of measurement of what that means. And essentially that will try to give us that per project, and not just the, let's say, we come to the board every quarter with the full set of engagement that we did. What this is changing a bit, not changing, complementing the information is per project, what is the mobilization that is happening there? We'll see how it works, but that's the idea. Those are ready to be rolled out. The ones that we are concluded, ANI, stakeholder engagement, communication, and insights team with the TRC. And now let's move forward to what is to be commenced in the next quarter. So we will continue pilot the role of CFOs and then the PIRs. This is, as I say, I would say, at least from our experience, is probably the most challenging project, let's say, stream for us, in the sense that it really requires to have a kind of a deep thinking on what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what can we improve. Initiatives rollout, the implementation aid kit checklist and mobilization analytics dashboard, that you will start seeing information about this in board papers going forward. And we will start pre-initiatives in the second half of the year. One is this post rollout activity impact review guidance. This is a long name, but this is essentially what can we do and think in what regards impact of our standards, let's say, in the interval that goes from certification to the PIR. So is there something there that we can do to have a better sense of the impact of the standard? Then two other initiatives that we think can also be very relevant to the way we relate with stakeholders and really getting smart, getting more responsive, and improve mobilization, which is this better outreach initiative. So we have innovated a lot on FCG, the different type of activities that we developed there. We have quite a good, let's say, internal knowledge of what type of outreach and engagement works, doesn't work, and really the thinking here will be to review all this and come up with some ideas if there's things that we can improve in this in our approach to outreach. And the other one is what we've heard, what we've changed template, which is just thinking again, is there something that we can do in the different phases of the projects to improve the perception from stakeholders on what was the impact or the follow-up to the input that they gave us. So that's essentially what we'll be thinking, and in the second half of the year, and we'll come back with updates on this for discussion. And with this, I have finished. So, Chair, I would give you
Thank you very much, Rui. Well, I'm not going to say anything for now, but I'd really like to hear the board reactions, the board's reactions to what we have heard, which is reflects an impressive amount of work, and I would say, but this is my opinion, an impressive progress with respect to how we work, how we do things, how we connect, how we engage, and how we deliver. But I'll listen to board members who may have also some opinions. Tomoyo, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the team for the hard work. I was quite impressed with what have been done. So before coming to this board meeting and reading these materials, I felt too many paperworks, administrative things, and but hearing to today's presentation, I thought it's quite reasonable, and it will be good that there will be more transparency on the mobilization, and so I think this is a good initiative. I thought the TRC database also is a good initiative. So my question is, it's good, but we have to input TRC database, mobilization database, so there seems to be many place to put the input. So, and I heard a plan to use the Teams for more good communications, but how are we going to control these many templates is the one question. The other thing that technology, the technology focus page update and this message that has been sent is, I think, is very good, because it's for technology. I believe the important thing is to do the expectation control. So I think this is good. But actually, I even didn't realize this was posted to the website while I'm subscribing in the IESBA news and whatever. So how people will recognize that this has been posted? It seems to be a challenge, but thank you. I think this is a good initiative.
Thank you very much, Tomoyo. Rui and team, do you want to respond now or to collect some other? 6 minutes. No, we will.
Maybe it's better to go around. Yeah,
okay.
Maybe it's better to go around and then we'll
Okay, okay. David, please.
Thank you, Chair. So mine's really easy. I love what you guys are doing. I think the visual around how it looks, the engagement, the simplicity of the read, I think it's literally night and day different from where we were even just a couple of years ago. I would share the feedback from Tomoyo around, and we heard this as well through some of our outreach, how do we get messages out more clearly so that they reach the target audience as well? Because often they don't know. That's my only constructive feedback in terms of opportunity, but otherwise you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you, David. Nancy, please.
Thank you. I will echo others' comments on the real value of what you all have established here. I'm such a process person, so creating methodology, I think, is just so critical going forward. I think it's efficient and it's also effective, so I really appreciate that. What has struck me, and I think this is maybe playing a little bit on where Obacheko may have been discussing, is there's a couple of different aspects of what you're doing. One, there's a project to stand this up and develop all the methodology, develop any templates, et cetera, that you're using. But and then there's what I would call sort of the vertical enablement part of this that goes in and enables a project, and that's built in to the project's action items and the project plan for the project. But then I think there's also more of a horizontal piece. And I'm thinking in particular And this is just an example, but I do think it's important that we think about leveraging things horizontally. So, there's this Excel spreadsheet database that's intended to be developed, I think, for some of the mobilization framework, and then there's going to be work with IFAC on the CRM. We really should be thinking about one CRM for all of these activities with very easy entry points, and which should be automated to how to develop this. And so as we're thinking about this, I think, how do we leverage the methodology and the processes across all projects? And then there's the specific project methodology as well. And so and this is in the spirit of continuous improvement. I'm a big fan of what you all are doing, and encourage further action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Rui, I will continue. When you think that it's time to stop and respond, just let me know, okay? Okay.
No, I can respond.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so I'll be very quick. So first, on these ideas of complexity and the way we will make all this work. It is a challenge. We'll see how it works. So what can I? We have a very, let's say, we have that very clear in our heads, and the effort is try to embed all processes within existing processes. And I don't think we are envisioning, let's say, significant changes to what we do. So, for instance, with maybe the exception of the TRC, which is, we hope, an additional, let's say, process or within the way we work, but we really need it in terms of getting the information that we can process, so that we can come back to the board with something that is more, let's say, condensed or structured. So there's that point there. Then on the mobilization analytics, we do already do this, or we should, right? When we do an outreach, we have that information and we kind of present it to the board. So what we are asking now is just for project leaders, essentially, to, let's say, monitor their projects, and whenever there is an outreach, to try to get some data into their own mobilization, which is, again, as I say, I would say it's an additional point, but I would say it's just a way of organizing information that we already have. Tomoyo, you will get a news alert. As we speak, you should be getting it this morning on the snapshot. So all our database of around 30,000 followers will get the snapshot on technology. So that's that point on how to get people to get to know more the work we do. We're trying. So I think we are being, for instance, we are engaging increasingly more on social media, and we are seeing some effects of that, of people engaging with us. It's also the way we let's say, relate, and hopefully with let's say, easier content to read, that will also help us. On the CRM, on that part, I should probably pass it on to Elaine and John. So we don't have a CRM, right? The IFAC is developing a CRM. We'll see exactly how that plays and connects with us. As I haven't been here for a while, we have had experiences that, to my recollection, have not been that good with the current CRM, or close what was supposed to be a CRM. So, but we definitely are monitoring that let's say, the potential of the new IFAC's approach to the CRM, namely under adoption and implementation. So hopefully we can get some improvement or efficiency there.
Very early days, and we've only just started the conversation with IFAC, but as our understanding is, when they're going through this new process, they're adopting a new CRM system. But obviously we want to stay close to that conversation and see what they're doing. And initial conversations is there is potential for us to request or add additional fields in terms of, for example, if they're asking for information from PAOs throughout their sort of annual process. But as I said, I can't really say much more at this point. We need to engage with them further in terms of what they're using, whether we can access it, whether we can influence it. So, but we'll certainly keep you informed as we progress with that.
Thank you very much. Rania, please.
Thank you. So just to second the comments, I think this is really great. And to David's point, I think we've really like improved a lot.
Can you speak a bit closer to the mic, please?
Yeah, I think that it's been, I mean, really great improvement as compared to where we were, let's say, a year ago or even more. But I just have a few comments. There's always room for, I would say, improvement. So first of all, on our website. So it just happened. I'm not an expert on this, certainly not, but it happened that recently we've been working on, I've been involved, let's say, on 2 different web pages at the university. And so we exposed, you know, the different drafts of the web pages to different people, sort of like what we do here. And so some of the comments that I got, so I'm comparing, you know, what we have in terms of a web page or website to the feedback that I've got, that people don't like to read anymore. I think this is something that is common. So I would recommend that when we, let's say, the landing page, for example, under who we are and what we do, I really like the video that you put in there. But for example, rather than bullets, perhaps have icons or visuals or some clickables or something like that. So people like, you know, little nuggets of information, I would say, rather than, you know, bullets and, you know, text. So that's my first point. My second comment is, just a personal thing that happened. I was recently involved in a discussion on anti-corruption efforts in the country, and I mentioned that, you know, the audit profession, no CLAR standards, so on and so forth, and we had a big conversation around it. Few days later, I get a call from someone who was telling me, I went on your website, I couldn't find anything about, you know, no CLAR. He didn't know that we refer to it as no CLAR. And so I think he was Googling something around violations or something of that sort. And so my point is, I would recommend that you consider making our website more easily searchable by people who are not technical, who don't know that they are really searching, for example, for no CLAR, but something, you know, around this topic. So I think it makes it more accessible. So we're talking about accessibility. So that's my second point. My third point on areas of focus, and I think that's also to David's point when it comes to reaching out, you know, to stakeholders. And I think I mentioned this before. I would recommend that when the board is discussing, I mean, for certain areas that we'd like to focus on. For example, let's say this meeting, one of the key decisions that was made was with regards to firm culture and governance. I would start, let's say, ahead of time, you know, engage, like alerting or sending out messages that we're going to be discussing firm culture and governance, and then let's say attend the discussion or join us or observe the discussion on this date, send them the link, you know, sort of those areas of focus that you want our stakeholders, you know, to be attentive to during that time period. I would like try to engage them more directly in real time. Let them observe the discussion, let them see how the deliberations were, how they went, why the logic of the board to reach this. So that's my recommendation. And then my final comment is on social media. I mean, for one, I have to say, I mean, sometimes I'm active on social media and sometimes like I'm completely absent. So if you tag us, perhaps not for every post, not for all the board members for every post, but if you tag us, it would help us, you would prompt us to get more engaged and, you know, get the message out there. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rania. Very good suggestions. Rui, I'm going to move to others and then, okay, give you the opportunity to respond. Mark, please.
Like other colleagues, I really welcome this. The work that's been done is really good. I suppose a couple of points. One is I very much agree with the point that was made about this being a single version of the truth. So, you know, the more that we can actually have one repository of information for the board's work and not have separate pockets of it, the better. And it sort of reminds me in a way of some of the issues that we were talking about in the executive session. It makes us more efficient if there's a single version of the truth. Success breeds success. And so therefore, one of the downsides of this is you're going to get lots more requests for additional things as part of this project. And again, as part of that single version of the truth and efficiency and making things easier for us, I'm always minded of the fact that every item we discuss on the agenda in the board, we have an enormous slide pack that takes goodness knows how long to put together. And we start off with a recap of what happened from the dawn of time until today on each project. We've actually all read the papers before we got here. We don't need it. So please feel empowered to take stuff away that's not needed, that makes our communications more cluttered and more difficult, and actually allows us to focus on the really important things. So thanks for all the great work.
Yeah, I think that thanks on behalf of everyone for some good suggestions. Just adding, if I may, Mark, to your point, one version of the truth, a consistent, unique repository of information, but it's also a repository of message. That's what they mentioned. And this is something on which I'm always insisting. This is the space for disagreement. Once we go out as a board, we need to have a consistent voice, consistent message, consistent approach. Otherwise, this will look very, very fragile and vulnerable. So, and sometimes it's not intentional. It's not because we have different opinions, but because we have different ways of communicating. And this, over time, may have caused some significant issues and problems to this board because there was different messages or passed in different ways. Let's put it like this, which created some confusion outside. So that's why the SMART project is making this effort of having, at least for now, internally, a consistent messaging repository so that when we speak about CFO or about the PIRs or about FCG or whatever, the message is consistent. And we need to be very attentive to that important point because our strength and our credibility also depends on our ability to stand in front of our stakeholders with a very consistent and aligned message. So sorry for this this comment. Sadia, I think you wanted to. Yeah. Okay.
I think the point that I was going to make has been covered, but I just want to mention that these things take time and resources. So I really would encourage a staggered approach that we don't go too fast, too soon. And also, this is also going to be felt by the audience. So they might need a little bit more time to get used to different way of receiving things. I also would like to think about us looking at what is being well received by the market and what isn't being well received by the market so that we can give ourselves time to focus on what the audience wants. The last publication on proportionality, I don't think it got enough airtime, and it's a very important one. So we must make sure that we are, one time might not be enough, because if Rania wasn't on social media, she might have missed it. And I also missed it. But it would be something we must think about reinforcing. Thanks.
Thank you, Sadia. So, Rui, back to you.
I really don't have much to add other than thanking very much all these great suggestions, and of course we'll give it a good thought and try to incorporate them. And this idea of just maybe one comment on this idea of being visible. There is the way we get visible nowadays. It depends a lot on the production of let's say unique content. Because we increasingly are shown through AI tools rather than regular old-fashioned mechanisms. Even when you go Googling nowadays, what you're getting back is the result of an AI tool. That as well, if you are, for instance, a news provider, that is very bad for you, and all the websites in the world from news providers are showing, let's say, a decrease in the number of visits. But it is good for, I would say, organizations like us, as long as you provide specific unique content, such as the snapshots, Q&As, FAQs, this type of proportionality documents. So I would also I would say the way we are getting the information out there, it's changing a bit, and I think it plays a bit to our advantage, hopefully. And that's also why we have been working, let's say, so hard on trying to develop the snapshots, for instance, or this proportionality document. One final comment then, just to say that is, we are talking about a lot about communication, but I cannot stress this enough. That is maybe two things. One is on the smart, it has a communication dimension, but really I would say the smart is really about the way we think and work. So I think, because I think that's the only structural way to actually get let's say consistent results over time. And the other one is, although we are very happy and of course proud to have positive feedback on the communications, I would from the let's say the communications team's part, we would really like to highlight and share that really the communication is only as good as the work that the technical staff and the boards allows us to have. And that is without that, there's no communication that can work. So just highlighting that, and I think it's visible, and much of the content that we produce, were it not for the great effort and contribution and, let's say, the fundamental work from the technical team, it would not have been possible. Just to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rui and Tim. I think this was amazing, and that the presentation and to see the organization grow this way with all this progress. The objectives of this, the initial objectives of this smart framework were to help us work better and deliver better results, and above all, make sure that all the capacity that we have to produce good outputs is leveraged based on some criteria, elements, pillars, framework, etc. It's very nice. I think that there was a time at the start, the board was very supportive, and I think that the board was always very supportive. I think that there was a time in between where the board was starting to think, well, will this materialize in something concrete, or are we just seeing a communication exercise? I'm very happy to see it very quickly, by the way, with the resources that we don't have, to see it materializing in something very concrete, and that we see contributing very significantly to the credibility, the robustness, and the preparedness of this organization to be an organization that can shoulder with other international organizations with much more capacity than we have, but making the miracle of transforming very scarce resources in something very valuable. I would have a lot of comments on the content, but we definitely don't have time. There are very valuable developments and progress and already achievements in this area of different nature. Just because probably it was the last comment that Rui made, this idea that communications is only as good as the work, the quality of the work that we do. This is not only absolutely true, the communication can do not miracles, magic, on top of something that does not exist, but it's also intentional. The kind of communication that we want to have is not a PR or whatever a kind of communication. It's really something that walks hand in hand with the technical work and the strategic approach that we have, and is used for the public interest. And using the communications for the public interest means exactly what we are doing, trying to take the good work that we do closer to stakeholders, more accessible, create more awareness, and create a channel to discussion and to bring us doubts, concerns, etc., so that stakeholders are better served, the public interest is better served through our work. So no confusions here. This is not a PR exercise or technical communication. This is strategic communication to leverage the quality of the service that we provide. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much, Tim. This is an amazing amount and quality work done. Someone mentioned, I think it was Tomoyo, that you were a little bit surprised by the number of people working in this area. Did you say that? But the numbers in that table that you saw yesterday are what they are, because we have a number of people working, but it's like a very small, very, very small part of their time. Still, we thought that it was important to include the many team members in this work, because this is about how we collectively do things. So it's also about capacity building, internal growth, and etc. That we thought it should be collectively done and not by one member telling the others how this is done. So thank you so much. We'll stop here. Thank you, team. And I'm going to make a proposal to this board that we switch the order of the agenda topics, and that we now move to the two approvals that we need to make here, which is on private equity and farm culture and governance, formal approvals. And then we break, and then we'll go to the strategy session. I think it makes more sense, and that we will have probably a little bit more time. So if the private equity team is ready, we could now move to the private equity. Elaine is there. She's not moving. Yeah. And Jeanne, we will wait for her. Sorry for this surprise, Jeanne, but I know that you are always ready. Okay, and I'm going to give you the floor immediately without any other delay.
Can I just get 2 minutes to log on to the Zoom call to be able to share my screen? I wasn't
Sure.
prepared. Sorry.
Maybe as John gets set up, I'll sort of introduce our topic again. So after our lovely discussion, the project team went back and considered all of the comments and suggestions, revisions to our proposed terms of reference. And we thought that it would be simplest to perhaps just show on the screen. And we've also circulated ahead of time the proposed revisions. So if by chance we need any further clarification on why we did or did not change something, please do let us know.
Thanks so much for that, Elaine. It just gave me enough time to share my screen. I just want to make it a little bit bigger so that it is easy to read. Thank you again for all the feedback that we received on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken, to enhance the terms of reference. As Elaine mentioned, this was shared yesterday afternoon. I am going to jump directly to the sections that we have updated. So the first one is in part 6, where amendments was made to subbullets C, D, and E. This was based on feedback that we received just to clarify around, firstly, where the potential ethical and independence issues are identified for the purpose of the investment transactions. That's the enhancement in C. And D, where we made some proposals around the definitions and also just clarifying, if I'm not mistaken, that was your point, Christelle, on the ethics and independence risks associated with investment models as it relates to the specific accounting firms as well. We received feedback we referred to during our presentation where we would consider commissioning NAM, and we were requested to add this specifically to the objectives, and that is the subbullet E that was added to that extent. Going on to paragraph 7E we were encouraged to also talk about the positives and not just around the negatives. That's where we added the word opportunities as well. On the approach, paragraph 11, Rania, you made the suggestion to add strategic. That was taken on and added to that sentence. And then a comment was made that we remain agile, and that is reflected in paragraph 12 as such. On paragraph 16, Amarjit, if I'm not mistaken, this was your point. There we were encouraged to reach out both to investors and users, and that was the reason why we added that specific user group that was recently established to have a conversation with them directly on this topic as well. Then on paragraph 19, consider where ethical independence are identified, that we may recommend timely actions. This just speaks to the point again on agility. And then also just recognizing the time and the urgency of this topic. A slight wording change in paragraph 20 to see whether we are able to move a little bit quicker, but just to say that by the March 2027 or no later than March 2027, that a final report with recommendations and the proposed way forward would be presented. And then paragraph E just paragraph E just pulls together, just in a clear, concise way, stipulating the deliverables, referencing to the non-authoritative material, and then just with the final report. That's the changes that was taken up in consultation with the board advisors. Happy to pause at this stage, and Gabriella, hand back to you if there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Jean, and my apologies again for this change on the agenda. So comments from board members, questions about these changes? So now, please.
I just sent an email to you, but I don't know whether you have received my email. I know the slight difference between 6E and 22C in terms of commissioning NAM. On 6E, we said consider commissioning NAM, and on paragraph 22C, we said definitely commission NAM. So is it intended?
The wording is intended as it is, but I think the interpretation of development as appropriate. So I think it kind of complements each other. We will consider it only if it's appropriate, and then actually develop the NAM. If there's, it might be that it happens after the report or before the report as well. But it's the intention within the wording. Ken, I don't know if
Okay, but it would be probably good to have consistency between the two draftings, which are different. I think that's your point, right? On one of them says consider whether to commission, right? Yes. And the other says consider commission. Yeah. I think it's a matter of words, but
I mean, my perspective is not necessary because the qualifying words as appropriate actually addresses the consideration. So if it is not appropriate, obviously the project team is not going to develop the NAM. So that's because otherwise it just leaves it a bit hanging. So I don't think it's necessary to just duplicate the wording. The appropriate does the trick.
okay. Any other questions or comments, suggestions? Okay, John?
Thank you. I couldn't find my thing. I guess I'm curious as to what the project team's thinking is as to the changes you've made to paragraph 20. I know I posed the challenge on pace and timeliness. Does that change mean that it still says that it's going to be done in 9 months?
So the intention of the project team is to get this done sooner than later. So it is definitely the urgency. We are not 100% sure whether we will be able, it depends on what we're finding, recognizing that this is a changing environment. That's why we made those changes earlier up in the document, but we are going to try and get the report out sooner than later. But just, we try to, I know it's still 9 months.
Okay. What I would say, so Chana.
Yeah, I think those final words, what did Mark say? It's the bureaucratic way in UK to say no later than by March 2027, March 2027. But maybe it could be, so the intention, as John said, was that to try and do it by 6 months. But maybe what you have to do is to just lose the part about the preliminary findings and sort of say the project team will aim to present its final phase 1 report no later than March 2027. And then it doesn't give that sort of, I can see what John is saying, it's sort of very confusing. And I don't think it sort of conveys our intent, because the intent was to try and do it faster and no later than March 2027.
Thank you, Chana. I think that what's here on the table is a concern about timing, of course, timeliness. We also heard yesterday, I think it was Sadia saying there will be a lot of things to do, but it's better to start coming out with something than waiting for the perfect product. I think it was what you said. But I see that there are others, so I'm not going to conclude. Nancy, please.
Just real quick on timing, and because I have had some interaction with this topic, I don't think we know yet what we're going to do. And so I think setting a date of no later than March, that doesn't mean we can't accelerate something, but I think the project team needs to have time to determine what does those next steps look like. This is an incredibly complicated environment, and I just don't think we know yet to be able to commit to an earlier date. But I do have the sense that everybody on this board and the staff do understand that there is a sense of urgency here on getting something out. But I think we have to allow the project team to determine what next steps look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Christelle, please.
Yes, thank you. I support this formulation. I think we have discussed also the question of the pressure on the teams, etc. So I understand this formulation as we are committed to do our best, and it will be no later than March, and the sooner we can, and it's okay for me.
Thank you, Christelle. Luigi, please.
This idea to be faster and to try to keep update the board has been reflected into some changes above, and in particular with those relating to the NAM, where there is a clear attention of the project team in order to be fast in identifying matter that may be brought to the attention of the board. On the other end, I echo other members, this is really not an easy area, and I would prefer having some flexibility instead of having a tight deadline that we risk not to be able to achieve.
Thank you, Luigi. Christelle and Nancy, do you still want to speak? Okay. So I think that we have lost Obichuku on the camera. I don't know what's happened, but okay. So what I hear is a broad agreement or full agreement around what has been proposed in terms of changes to the terms of reference. With respect to this last topic of timeliness, I understand all the perspectives, but of course, and the formulation allows us that flexibility that some of you has pointed out as being important. Still, I would say that timeliness is very important. Well, it's always very important. It's part of the quality of the product and the effectiveness of the product. I think that in this area is even more for 2 or 3 reasons. One is that we are seeing developments, regulatory developments, advancing here and there, and I think that we should not take the risk of allowing these fragmented approaches to develop around the world, and the IESBA coming after with a standard, which may prevent some fragmentation and may set a little bit the context for others to do things. And the second is that I think it was a little bit John's point yesterday, when we are dealing with entities and realities such as private equity, for whom one day is an eternity, 9 months can look and really be an eternity, and something that will not match the speed of and the pace of evolution and developments that these entities put in place. So with a word of caution, not to delay what we may need to do. And since these are findings and not necessarily the final product, I'm comfortable with the drafting, as I think you are, but I would leave here a word of incentive for this to be done within the shortest possible time frame, not to allow these possible unintended consequences. So I think we can consider this. I mean, Ken, I think that we need a formal approval or no? Does anyone disagree? Does anyone have an? Okay, so we will take this as approved, the terms of reference, and I'm very happy for that because this is an important day for the IESBA in terms of how we position ourselves with respect to a topic which was not in our agenda, never foreseen before, and still we are being able to be agile, responsive, and mobilize ourselves to respond to some market developments that we could not address. Thank you very much. I would now move to the FCG topic. So we had the discussions and conclusions and considerations and decisions that we had that we made on Monday. But now we need some to formalize this approval. I think it's what this is about. So I'm gonna give the floor to the team.
Maybe I'll. Thanks. So on FCG, we did have the whole day on Monday where we came to a way forward in respect of the options. So that is a requirement in the code, which we will come back to the board with a draft. Now, in terms of what we want to discuss with our half-hour session today, we'd like to discuss two things. One is timeline, a proposed timeline from the project team and the board advisors. And the second thing after we discuss the timeline is also some initial reactions from the board or suggestions or comments with respect to how how proportionality and scalability might be considered when we develop the draft. Now, in terms of timeline, what is proposed is essentially a first read in September and seeking the board's approval to issue an exposure draft by December. Alongside that, the plan is to also concurrently develop non-authoritative material. However, that non-authoritative material will be developed over a period of time. And so the plan is to also come back in September with a roadmap for this, the plan of non-authoritative material development. So I just want to pause here and see if the board has any comments on the proposed timeline. Back to you, Gabriella.
Thank you very much, Cam. So any reactions? Christelle, please.
I have a question to better understand how you what's around your timing proposition. I am a little bit upset about the fact that the light message that we issued was it yesterday or the day before, was the board has decided to include FCG within the code, or to change the code to include elements for FCG, which is a very streamlined information. Which for me could be read as it can be option 2 and it could be option 3. Now, the element that we have approved to be included in the code is quite I don't know what is the right word, but it's a tiny bit, okay, compared to what we have been issuing these last years. So how do you explain that we need 6 months to get to a point where we are ready for an exposure draft? I know that there is not only the proposition for we intend to include this, and there is a whole lot of information to get a the right level of feedback. Okay, but how could you explain us more? And also, if we could have a bit of inside information on what you intend to explain to the stakeholders in the coming days about what we decided.
Okay, maybe I'll take the timing bit, and then in terms of the communications, we can do that separately afterwards. But for timing, first of all, if Christelle, are you suggesting that maybe 6 months is too long? Okay, just wanted to. Okay, yeah. Well, the 6 months does allow us, because even though it does sound like, I think you mentioned it's a few paragraphs or whatnot, but these are critical, words matter, and these are critical paragraphs. And I think even within the board, as we saw during the discussions on Monday, you know, there is a diverse range of views, and we do need to take into consideration all the viewpoints essentially on the specific comments raised, including also from the consultants' report, where there was also a number of comments raised. So we do want to allow the time for conversation, for dialogue, for input, and for turnaround. So we don't want to, we want to allow a measured pace for back and forth to come up with a draft that, you know, we can take forward. Yeah.
Thank you, Christelle Kam. Are there any other questions? Well, I think on communications, if I may, on the communications piece, if I may, we are preparing news alert, right? Who is that the name?
It is.
News alert. The time has not been, you know, enough for us to do anything, but the intention is, of course, to explain things in the best way possible and to avoid that perception that we understand that, you know, the big world around us, knowing what we have done in the past, may have interpreted a few things in a different way, but we needed to say something. So this is the time to explain. I count on the board members very much to get out with the right message. And I remember that what we have decided is, as you call it, a tiny, you know, one line requirements, very high level, absolutely principles based, etc., and then application material, which even if being in the code has not the nature of a requirement. And this has to be well explained, because I think that the concerns were around the idea that IESBA might come up with something like, you say, option 3, with everything in the code in a very prescriptive way, all the elements with the same strength, and etc. There is work to be done, right? But what we anticipate is this to be a very, 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 very short piece to be included in the code. I don't dare saying 1 page, 2 pages, but I would say that it's not going to be anywhere beyond that. And it's one tiny high-level requirement, one line, overarching, which, by the way, is not even detailed, just setting the anchor for other things to be done, and with the right level of flexibility for this to be taken according to the nature of the firms, quality of the firm, etc. So this has to be very well explained. It's not easy to explain. I recognize that, also because people have a historical idea of how we do things, which may not help with that explanation. But I ask the board members to be, wherever you go, to be very clear about this. Of course, we will do the best of our efforts to communicate this properly. Mark, please.
So all I would ask, perhaps in a follow-on from Christelle, is IESBA will need to communicate, but we have to be very careful not to communicate in a way that presumes the board has taken a decision, because the board will need to take a decision to approve any exposure draft for issue, and we shouldn't assume what that decision will be. And I think in part, it links to the point that I raised the other day, that any high-level overarching requirement is going to be really hard to draft. it is going to be really hard to draft. And I think, you know, even with a really good team working on it, it is not an easy thing to do. So we have to communicate and we have to get our message out there, but we can't presuppose what the decision of this board will be.
At all, Mark. We said it many times. This is the start, not the end. This is the direction that the board gave to the project team to develop this framework into code in a certain way and with a certain approach. So thank you for stressing that as well. This is not the decision about the project. This is I don't know how to call it different from decision, but this was the direction that this board agreed to take with respect to how this is going to be developed. Tomoyo, please.
Thank you, Chair. So just want to understand. So does this mean that the intention is for the board to discuss the ED draft on this in December? Is that what is expected to happen? Thank you.
There will be, thanks Tomoyo, thanks. So there will be 2 reads. There could be more, but the first read will be in September board meeting, and then the second read in December, and then it will be sought for approval. However, that does not preclude, we'll circulate for further iterations of the draft in between board sessions, and potentially, if needed, you know, a session virtual potentially. And we haven't spoken about this, but it's not precluding other interaction with the board during these quarters.
Thank you, Cam. Tomoyo, I think that you still want to follow up on your question.
We expect the ED to be issued. ED will be issued at some timing.
Yes, December. So
December, okay.
we'll seek the board's approval in December, and if it's approved, that it will be issued. Yeah.
And where the draft of the ED will come up, maybe earlier, maybe
yes,
take time.
September board, there'll be a draft. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I'm clear.
Thank you, Tomoyo. John, please.
Thank you, Gabriella. So if we read a draft of it in September, and this board believes that the project team has done an excellent job and is happy with it, is it possible that we could at that point say, well, actually, we don't need to have a second read. We could approve it in September, and because I hear Christelle's challenge as to how can it take 6 months, in the same way as I was challenging the private equity team about 9 months. So I wonder whether we can just give ourselves that little bit of flexibility to say, well, we will come with something in September if it's ready, and if the board believes it's able to approve it, then at that point we could. If not, then we'll have another bite of the apple in December.
Fair enough. And I do see Ken put his tent card up, so I don't know if you want to respond.
Yes, thank you, Cam, and thank you, John and Christelle, for raising this question. It is going to be very important for the board to engage with stakeholders about the direction of travel. So even though the board, in theory, could approve an exposure draft in September, stakeholders would not have had an opportunity to understand where the board is going and why the board has landed with that particular approach. So that additional quarter would provide the board and the project team with the opportunity to engage with some important stakeholders, the Stakeholder Advisory Council, jurisdictional standard setters, importantly, the firm of firms and the SMP Advisory Group. These are critical touch points that it would behoove the board really to have the benefit of really hearing the feedback and calibrating any final refinements before going out to market. And of course, there are going to be institutional meetings with regulators as well, IFIA and IESBA. So these are important touch points. I would advise the board to not omit in the interest of really being inclusive and also avoiding any surprises
I also do not believe that just because this is short makes it easy. In fact, sometimes I think the shortest things are the most challenging. Mark said it a couple of days ago. We're probably going to end up having to define firm culture. That in and of itself, I think is going to be perhaps very, very challenging. I mean, I spend my days analyzing a particular word and what it means. And so I think this board has an obligation to spend the time analyzing the words that we develop and making sure that they are actually able to be complied with a common understanding so that they're consistently applied so that their users can in fact comply with the code. And so I personally believe that having a first read through in September with an exposure draft in December is a responsible and timely approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Hector, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think part of the thinking on the timeline that Cam presented was also that some of you said we would like to see the NAM or the plans for the NAM together with the adoption of any changes to the code. And as you understand, the NAM on the 8 elements is going to be a big amount of work to develop. And it makes sense to give the project team the time necessary to come up with maybe a plan, maybe a few samples of what the NAM is going to be by the time of adoption, so that there is clarity on the intentions and the methods. So this was also part of the thinking when we were met after our decision on Monday to decide what could be the best timeline for the execution.
Thank you, Hector. Luigi, please.
Yeah, I also agree with Nancy that I don't see any reason why we need to have an accelerated process here, which does not seem that there are any urgency reason or urgency expectation from the market that we need to rush at the risk of the quality of our work or at the risk of not having the time as board member to have a calibrated and balanced analysis of even a single line that in the intent of the board should have a very big impact on the professional accountant and the firm. So it is not, I would not diminish the level of difficulties of this single line if the board would like really to have an impact that matters. I urge the project team to take their time in order to do the best for the profession and for the public interest, and not to have a rush that could really create unintended consequences.
Thank you, Luigi. Vanya, please.
Thank you. I support the proposed timeline of the project team, and I think that 6 months is perfectly acceptable considering the importance of the project.
Thank you. Vanya, Rania, please.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make one recommendation or suggestion to the project team. I've heard several comments or suggestions or notions that we may have to define what culture is or ethical culture is. So I just wanted to say that, in my view, you don't really need to provide a definition of ethical culture if that is going to be an impediment and a major obstacle to progress. And I'll give you a very well documented example. So the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, which is the most comprehensive convention against corruption, does not define corruption, because the authors of that convention were very conscious that it might limit the scope, and corruption, it's a very fluid concept, and there might be new and innovative ways of of carrying out corruption, and so they don't provide a formal definition of corruption. And so I suggest that we do not complicate things, realizing, cognizant of the fact that, the inherent complexity of the project itself. So that's just my recommendation.
Thank you very much, Rania. Sadia, please.
So 2 points. I wanted to lean my support for the need for consultation with stakeholders between the first read and the finalization. I think that will assist the board to understand if we're reaching the right balance and any unintended consequences in the exposure draft. The second one, I think it was my suggestion that the NAM and the exposure draft be considered concurrently. And I just wanted to explain that there. I think that it's important for us to know what the NAM is going to include to make sure that it needs to be in NAM and not within the code and vice versa. So I don't expect that the NAM would be ready, but kind of a scoping of what you're thinking about on this NAM would be helpful so that we can consider it collectively.
Thanks, Sadia. And just on the NAM point, because I know you and Hector also mentioned it as well. The plan is really for us, the project team, to come back in September with the roadmap of this NAM, and recognizing that some of the NAM will not be ready in December. It's a roadmap, right? It will span into the next year as well. So, yeah.
Thank you, Cam. Tomoyo, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I may say something controversial. I'm fine with the timeline to issue the draft in this December. But I want to alert that the fact that this project is taking time itself looks bad from the investors and the preparers, and the fact that it looks like IESBA and the farms or IFAC are arguing for so long. This itself will make people worried about the farm culture and governance. So I'm fine with the timeline because I think it will take time to create the NAM for the 8 elements to tie into the framework, and also the communication. So that I think it's really the important part is to have a constructive, good communication with the stakeholders. And as I'm repeating, let them feel ownership, let them understand that the investors and everybody is worried because of all the scandals happened, and that we need a global baseline. So fingers crossed about the communications, and I'm happy to support those communications where needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tomoyo, for your comment and for your offer to support this communication, because sometimes we are working too much, in a certain context where it makes it very difficult to understand what's the best way to approach the communications. Well, just one thing before I give the floor. So now, can I leave it to the end? It's not 6 months. It's going to be 3 years once the exposure draft is out. So it's not 6 months of work. Anything that we will do over the next 6 months will build on 2.5 years of impressive work before we issue an exposure draft. So this will be in the history. Sungnam, please.
Yes. As you said, we have spent 3 years already. So what's the matter? It's 3 months or 6 months? I don't care. Yeah. Yeah, in consideration all the points we discussed, and also in particular stakeholder engagement we need to make, and also the significant impact on the forms, I believe the suggestion, the proposal from the project team seems to be reasonable to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunam. Christelle.
I agree with the 6 months. In fact, I just wanted to have a pop-up discussion, and we had.
Thank you very much, Christelle. You managed. You achieved your objective, and importantly, by the way, it's not a futile conversation. Chana, please.
Yeah. So I think I was going to say the same thing that Gabriel and Sunam said. That we have been working on this for 2.5 years. So what does another 3 months or 6 months matter? And the other thing is sometimes writing something short actually takes longer than writing something long. So, and the other thing is this is short as well as the impact is very high. So therefore we need to get like every word right. So I think it's best to sort of let the project team work on it and get a good draft as possible for the September board meeting. And then the board can go through in detail. We can spend our time. And then after that, as Ken says, there's sort of a traditional engagement set up between September and December with the key stakeholder groups. So then everybody has a chance to look at that as well. And then the board can consider all the comments coming back in December.
Okay, so it seems that 6 months is going to be the time. I'll just add to this conversation, saying that I feel that there is a little bit of stakeholder fatigue with respect to the conversations on from culture and governance, and that this perception that Tomoyo mentioned, this doesn't look that good that we have been spending so much time to get to something that it's not even a decision, and then we'll take 6 months. There is a perception which does not necessarily benefit from this extended timeline. We did everything that we needed to do, and I think we should be proud of it with respect to the outreach and inclusiveness and feedback collection, responsiveness, and etc. But I think that the next 6 months, if I may, of course, some outreach will be necessary and some engagement. But I think this should be the time for us to calm down and be quietly and diligently trying to work on something that is good for discussion and good for deliberation a little bit later. So I think that stakeholders are tired as well. We requested a lot from them, and we need to recognize that all these exercises over the last 6 months, which was so important, it was about the focus groups. We saw how many people were involved from the firms and from the regulators in very, very specific time of the year, which is by nature and by design very, very demanding for the firms, plus the simulation exercise, plus the newsletters Rui mentioned. I don't know if you are if you have the notion about what it takes to get people like Carmen Adinoia, the chair of the FSP's audit roundtable, the chair of ISCGN. There is a lot of work behind it on our side and on their side as well. So, and all the others who were interviewed in these newsletters, we did what we needed to do. I don't think that we can and that we should keep this pace of outreach to stakeholders. So outreach from now on must be very, very targeted, very intentional, when needed and as needed. And this is time for us to, not put pens down, but take the pen and start doing the work a little bit in the quietness of our laptops and our smaller meetings. So we'll see what time will bring. But I see that everyone is more or less comfortable with this idea of the 6 months, but nothing is written on the stone. And if something goes faster, as John was saying, if we are so comfortable in September that we think that we can make a faster decision, of course, it is possible, and we'll see. We will measure and assess the consequences. So, Ken, do you need anything else from the board in terms of?
Well, the timeline was the key issue we wanted to discuss. The second thing I'd mentioned earlier was just any comments or suggestions from the board with respect to proportionality and scalability. However, I do note that we are up at our half-an-hour session and that we're up for a break, and afterwards we do have some sessions. So I don't know if we want to close it, or do we want to continue? I leave it
I
to
think
you.
we have here an opportunity. If it's something that the project team thinks it's important for you to receive some kind of feedback or whatever, of course, I think that we need to take the time to do it. What exactly do you have in mind, Cam?
Just open it up really to the board for any suggestions, comments, reactions to sort of addressing or incorporating proportionality and scalability within the drafting. I think, for example, Chana, you might have some suggestions that you wanted to get reactions from.
Yeah, I mean, I'll come in and then maybe let the board members speak first.
Okay, Sonam. Okay, Christelle, please.
One of the issue and source of contestation or discussion, etc., is about this, about do not transform 8 pillars into 8 requirements. This would not be proportional, scalable, etc. So everything is going to be in the way that you draft. We spoke about 2 things that are so the way that you express that the 8 pillars are the aspects of the subject that should be in the mind of the leader, and that promoting ethical culture is to some extent self-assessing and working on the relevant elements among these. This is going to be in the draft. The second one was when we had a discussion during our meeting about grouping some of the 8 elements to help have something eventually streamlined for communication and reminding well the structure of the what we call a firm ethical culture, and this might also help to see that or to evaluate the scalability and proportionality depending on relevant facts and circumstances.
Okay, thank you very much, Christelle. Obichukwu? It's not working. We are not listening to you. I'm going to pass to the next board member and then come back to you, okay? So, Amajit, please.
So very briefly, I think I already made those points that day on the proportionality and scalability about the small and medium firms. So some of the elements may not be applicable to them or may not be relevant. And I can send you more detailed notes on that, yeah. No, I've not emailed, but I mentioned it in my remarks that day. So just wanted to reiterate that.
Thank you, Amajit. And of course, any suggestions that you may have and that you want to send to the project team will be very welcome.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Obi, let's try again. See if we can hear you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, thank you. So about the proportionality, I think like we all know that principles are not are the same anywhere. It applies across board. So I think that shouldn't be scalability should not be brought in as it were, but it depends on how we draft the independent input. If we draft it according to the narration that it depends on, you can get independent input from your PAO or from and diverse external bodies, like it was mentioned in the agenda paper, then I don't think there's need for proportionality, because that's if you bring in that aspect, that already shows that that already brings in the proportionality. Otherwise, I don't think on ethical culture applies to both small and big firms. Thank you.
Thank you, Obi. Amajit, do you still want to speak? No. Chana, please.
Yeah, no, Amajit, that's why I told Cam to raise the point, because of what you raised during the thing about, small practitioners, and you sort of said that there were 70,000, or you mentioned a number like that. And I think that's some of the feedback we have got from the SMP groups as well. So when we are drafting, I mean, two things, Crystal, is like independent input and transparency are things that we have to carefully think um, about implications for SMPs. And then, as Obi said, some of the other elements like ethical leadership should be the same whether you're a large firm or a small firm. So we have to sort of go through each one as we are drafting and carefully consider how would this work in a large firm environment, maybe a medium firm and a small firm. I mean, some ideas is whether I think in the auditing standards, sometimes there is considerations for SMPs. So, I mean, the team can think about those sort of things so that to sort of show the SMPs we have thought about them, and here is a pathway for you all to address this element. So we have some ideas. We just wanted to sort of make sure that everybody understands that we are cognizant of the impact on SMPs and will be taking that into account as the project team progresses.
Thank you very much, Chana. Anyone else? Okay, Cam and team, is this useful and clear? Oh, Sadia, sorry.
This is probably the conversation that we're going to have in September a lot. Maybe I can already give one viewpoint. I like the word proportionality. When we get to SMP, I get a bit concerned because some SMPs actually are PI auditors. So we need to think about what's the driver of proportionality. And then this is where the concern is whether it sits in NAM or whether it sits in the code needs to be a consideration, because you can't scope it out in NAM if the requirement is kind of for everyone. But that seems to be, we need to know what we want to say before we start drafting, because once we start drafting, we're going to be at a detail level of what's the wording rather than what's our intention.
Thank you, Sadia. Ken, please.
Very quickly, Chair, thank you very much. Just on the matter of proportionality, and I would just maybe advise the board to be very mindful that even the global networks, within the global networks, there are SMPs in specific jurisdictions. So as Chana says, as the project team begins its work in terms of drafting the provisions, etc., there will need to be consideration around network arrangements, and within the global networks themselves, how the individual provisions would work when we're looking at a particular firm that's very large in one jurisdiction versus another network firm that's actually smaller firm in another jurisdiction. So it is going to be a very mixed picture.
I think this is going to be, as Sandia says, the most important conversation that we'll have in September, and and the biggest challenge probably for the board, for the team. For me, more than the drafting or the words, this is going to be really the big question that we haven't closed yet, and it can be, I think, a very nice exercise, because I think it will be like a pilot for a future. Probably more structured approach and consistent approach to how we look to the SMPs versus the big firms. So I think that a lot of considerations and a lot of things that we have been learning over the last very many months in terms of outreach, considerations, comments, suggestions, etc., will come to this conversation. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I must tell you, with a very open mind, with this idea that ethics is not proportional. We cannot say that more ethical or less ethical, but that it applies differently and for different reasons to different kinds of firms, and that we need to weigh well what it means for each one of them and what it means for the public interest. Ultimately, that's what we are speaking about. And that it's against that criteria that we will need to make decisions. So I'm very much looking forward for this decision with a very open mind on my side with respect to where we can land in this respect, and very much interested in making this like a lab or a sandbox for future initiatives and decisions that we'll need to make in that respect. So looking forward, and thank you for bringing that. Okay, so if there are no other comments, I think that we can close this session as well with this agreement that around what we I will not use the word decision, Mark Babington, what we agreed or where we landed on Monday, but it was really a decision about the way forward, about how to approach and explore the possible setup, the possible conception of a future framework. So thank you very much. I think this was an amazing discussion, a difficult one as well. Communication will be key to avoid any kind of misunderstanding about what this board agreed on. And of course, with this idea that there is work to be done, there are reflections, there is outreach still, and stakeholder mobilization as well that we will need to do. Thank you very much. We will stop now, I would say 20 minutes. So we will come back at 11:35 for the last session before the executive session. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for coming back for the last public session this morning and in this board meeting. And this one is on a discussion on strategic priorities for this board that we need to have, and we need to have it not now, but frequently, because as we have been mentioning this week, things change, the reality moves, the needs as well, sometimes the resources as well, they change. And we need to be able to adjust at all times, everything in a way that it's not casual, that we just react immediately to some changes in a casual way, but so that we have a structured idea about what we want to do, where we want to go, how we want to move, and where we are really relevant. We had the opportunity yesterday to have a good pre-conversation with this board on during the executive session. But besides the executive session, I think that this is something that has been present in our conversations, informal conversations, and even as we speak about the different work streams, the different topics, the different challenges that we face, this idea of strategic approach to the work, prioritization and resource allocation is coming to the conversation frequently. So I think that, well, we will not make any decision today. I don't think that we are in a position today to make any decision. The idea of this session was really to take the temperature and the pulse of the board and see what your main considerations, concerns and suggestions were. And I think that I can put for discussion a few high-level ideas and approaches which results from all these conversations and discussions that we have been having. We had a very rich conversation yesterday. I think that one of the ideas that came out of that conversation was the need, on the one hand, to include everything that we do in some kind of buckets, groups of things that we do. This was suggested by some of you. This was in my mind as well, so that it is easy to understand where the resources are, but also to mobilize the resources and change the allocation within those buckets or from one bucket to the other in a more on the one hand, rational and structured way, not just moving A and B here and there because we are reacting to something, and so that everyone, including our stakeholders, understand where we are, putting our cards and what our idea for the strategy of the board is. I can't conclude from the discussion yesterday that we already have clear what these buckets, these bags, these big areas of priority would be, but we can work on it and come back with a discussion for a discussion with this board. There was also this idea that we do a lot of things, all of them are important, but we need to understand or decide what are the ones that we cannot delay, which are the so-called burning platforms, the ones that they are also important and that we will continue doing, but it's less a priority, and the ones who are which are nice to have, and that we will do as possible and when possible. So there are different approaches. There were different approaches to how we set our priorities. That's what I understand from the conversation. I think that we might, but this is just an initial suggestion of how to approach this, include a few areas of work in one bucket. Sadia called it development. I think it was. We can call it whatever we want. The words matter, but it's not the point here. But the things that we are already doing and that we cannot not do, and I'll put there technology, private equity, firm culture and governance, they are probably the ones that we are developing, that we are doing and that we cannot delay. There are other areas here that we are on which we are working. Some of them are slowing down. Some of them have been stopped, like sustainability. Some of them are parked, like CIVs, and they will continue. And we'll see what happens with CFO in September. to see how this will be approached. Then we have another area, call it, I don't know, support. Let's call it implementation or support or whatever, where we have the work that is being done by the Adoption and Implementation Working Group. We have the PIRs, but I suspect that we will have more going forward as we move with a strategic orientation to do less standards and more application, more non-authoritative material, more support to the market in the implementation of the standards, and the application of the standards, and etc. So it's a little bit looking back what we have already done, but that we need to support. And then we have what also Sadi, I think, called the strategic areas, which are the ones that support all this and involve all this, the strategy and work plan work that we are doing for 2832, the SMART, the trends and risks communication also. So a number of things which support and involve all this. There was something very important that some of the board members brought here, which is the need to develop internal capacity in terms of the use of AI, in terms of project management and use of project management tools today again. So there is a topic of internal capacity. Some of you said, I don't remember anymore exactly who it was, probably John, Nancy, who said, but be careful because this, when we suggest that you use AI to reduce the need for human resource allocation to some areas or speed up some processes. This also involves resources because people will not know from one day to the other how to use the tools, how to use the instruments, and etc. And that's something that we will probably need to discuss, how much we want to look at this as a priority as well in the future, and if this is a strategic area or it's a development area, looking internally and not externally, etc. I think it would be very daring to come here today with a concrete proposal of how we allocate our resources, if we are going to put more people on technology or on private equity or take people away from this and there. Of course, I think that we all have some ideas, and I'll be happy to receive some concrete suggestions after the discussions that we already had. But, and of course, I will open the floor for considerations, but I think that all in all, we will need to develop this strategic approach to our work in a way that it's less dispersed, less split among I don't know how many projects and work streams and all these things, and that we can have some consistent approach by connecting or linking or including some of these areas of work under a strategic area of work, be it development, be it adoption and implementation, be it the application of the code. So we will see which areas are these, but I think that we definitely need to reduce not the number of projects and the number of work streams, but focus our area of attention in significant areas and not necessarily on one project or one work stream, because it depends on what we want to do with this board. And that might even facilitate in the future the use of the resources, because if we know that X% of our resources are allocated to develop, X% of resources are allocated to adoption and implementation, and to X% of resources to strategy or strategic projects, then within those buckets, let's say, it might be easier to mobilize the resources in a way that at each time they respond to concrete needs and concrete requests and developments without necessarily changing completely the strategy in terms of priorities and etc. So this is early days after the very rich discussion that we had yesterday, and it resonated a lot to me. I think there were a lot of good ideas. Some of them I had never thought about it, I confess, and they are very, very rich. My suggestion after opening the floor for board comments is that we come back to this topic after we do some work based on what we heard here, and we come back to the board with some ideas about how this might be organized, how this might look like, and how the resources might be allocated. So I think that this is what I have to say for now. Of course, adding that this is an important topic. We cannot just go and not understand how the resources are used. If we are actually doing what we need to do, if we are actually allocating the resources in the public interest, which means addressing the most important topics, very limited resources, by the way. We are just still working on some calculation about how our budget and resources evolved since 2018, and I tell you that the conclusion is probably not what you expected. But what I can say is that we are not actually very richly resourced, mostly compared to the past. So we have more resources in terms of people. And good people. That doesn't mean that we have everything that we need. On the contrary, to do what we need, because we heard today people speaking about CRM. We heard the need for a CRM, the need for project management. Yesterday, the need to build capacity to use AI tools. They are also cost money. I mean, it's not something that we can just say, okay, let's use ChatGPT and they will do everything for us. All this involves resources, not only because it costs money, dollars, but it costs time and from the staff, which may need to be moved from technical projects to internal capacity building and things like that. So there is a lot. I don't think that this is a simple discussion and a simple decision to be made, but of course with the benefit of your input, and I'll hear from you now. We will probably do the homework and come back with a proposal. So I'll stop here, and I'd like to hear from you. Besides what we, in a more informal way, said yesterday, if this resonates, if this is the approach. On the one hand, these buckets. On the one hand, understand what is the burning platforms that we cannot stop. Nor not to the less important and nice to have that someone mentioned as well. If you have any additional thoughts that may help us designing something for you and for us in the very near future. Mark, please.
Thank you. So I agree with what you've set out. And I do think that's a useful way of bringing things together. I will be amazed if at the end of this we actually cut some things from the programme, because everyone just seems to be pathologically against the idea of not doing something. And the thing is, you know, we do have to just not do stuff. So like a good suggestion is CIVs is parked. It should be no longer parked. It should be switched off, end of, full stop. Obviously, we've taken a decision not to go forward with 4B. That's a good thing. But there are other things that we just need to cut. And I go back to the paper that's been prepared for this agenda item. You know, we've got 6 projects on there that haven't been started yet, 3 of which are high priority and 3 of which are medium priority. Well, how about, you know, to help us, to give us the discipline, 1 of them is high priority and the other 5 are not priority at all, because we just can't do another 6 projects. So, you know, if we're really to get the benefit of this exercise, we have to cull things. I think the other thing that I'm really quite interested in is, you know, we assume that all the staff are available to work on projects, but actually they're not always available to work on projects because there's stakeholder outreach and things to go and do and meetings to go to. Do we actually know how much time is being devoted to the stakeholder outreach and to going to different things? And at least if we know how much that is, we can decide whether or not it's the right amount. You know, we may not be doing enough. We may be doing far too much. I don't know. And I do note that we've got this sort of endless round of engagement for very good reasons with IFER, IOSCO, whoever else. It doesn't require you to be there in person. You know, a lot of these things can be done remotely. And that again takes a bit of the burden off people from the travel, the days out that requires. I realise there are time differences that make life more challenging. But it's things like that that genuinely will allow us to have a more manageable workload. And when the next private equity emerges, as it will, that wasn't there on the work plan, we'll at least have some headroom to be able to respond to it. But I will be genuinely surprised. You'll win a bottle of champagne, Gabriella, if you come to the next meeting with a list of things that we're not going to do.
Thank you very much, Mark. I agree with almost everything you said, and I'm speaking seriously. I think that these are very good. This is very good advice and very good recommendations. Maybe I will surprise you, but we'll see. In two ways, I may be able to complete the 1,000 pieces jigsaw puzzle that you offered me last September, and I will be able to complete other jigsaw puzzles with which we are struggling. But I'm kidding. But I'm seriously. I think it's very good advice. Generally, I agree with almost everything. Now, the last comment. It's not that I don't agree. I agree as well. But we are already putting it in place, which is this very thorough, careful selection of meetings and outreach initiatives that we do in person and virtually. I also have numbers. I don't want to give them now because we are not completely sure about this, about how the travel and meeting costs went down. And it's huge. It's huge. It's really, really, really relevant. Maybe later we can come back with the numbers, but I don't dare saying them. But be prepared, because we are really doing that already in a very careful way. Of course, there are initiatives and moments where we need to be there in person, because otherwise it's going to be time spent without any real good feedback and engagement. And we need it. We need to create we need to keep on building our audience, and that's a very, very challenging thing to do. So, but on the rest, thank you very much for the advice. I think it's really good. Nancy, please.
Thank you. And maybe building on some of what Mark said, and not getting into maybe specific examples, but approaches to take. One is I was reflecting on our conversation yesterday. I think I had mentioned using some sort of scoring methodology or rubric. And I think that's really important. I think it's important because if we develop something like that, then that's something tangible that we can all talk about as to whether or not we agree with the components of the scoring methodology, but also the particular scores. The other thing I was reflecting on that I've been personally using a lot lately are heat maps. And thinking about the kinds of things that go into developing from a heat map perspective, when you look at all of the things you're doing, I think it gives you a nice visual aid of where things on a heat map look to be like more important or significant. And you can look at a lot of factors in there, but I think on what does a particular project do to protect the public interest? What is the value that the project itself is going to provide, and what is the level of that impact? Cost can be a consideration. Like, what is the level of effort? There's a lot of different ways you can look at this. In some ways, maybe having several heat maps might actually help. But I think what it does is it takes a quick snapshot of all of the elements in a way where you can go, wow, when I look at this based on where this lands on a heat map, it's clear that these things are where we should be really spending our resources on. These things probably less so. So just as a notion to consider into how to think through this, because I personally believe that building these kinds of rubrics are very, very challenging. Lots of people have different views on how to do that. But if you can get them done and you get alignment, they're incredibly powerful in terms of helping these very hard decisions. The other thing I want to focus on is maybe a little bit of think small too. So there's a lot of small things that you can eliminate that in combination end up with big impacts in reducing resource allocation. And there's a term that I love, the acronym is MVP. It is not most valuable player, but is minimum viable product that is used in software development. And minimum viable product, what it does is defines what is the minimum baseline for success. And that's what we're going to achieve is the minimum viable product. And then you move into continuous improvement. And so you do things in these phased life cycles where you're focused on, as long as we get this done, it will be good enough for the purposes that we can call it success, but we're not boiling the ocean in trying to get it to perfect. And what it really does is allows for a really good discussion about what are we talking about here? Is this MVP? Is this something we have to do? Or is this something that would be nice to do? And it takes those nice to do's and actually takes them kind of off the table in some ways because they're not critical to success. Then with both of these, the heat map and establishing what success looks like, what that MVP is, that's something then you can communicate to everybody, stakeholders, the board, staff, everybody. So there's a clear understanding of this is how we reach these conclusions. This is what it looks like. Not everybody's going to agree with it, but at least it's communicated on what the process was and how we're establishing, how we're setting priorities and what success looks like. So just some things I think to think about in terms of working through this. The other thing, and I think Mark has said this a couple of times now, but is really important, we're getting survey results in for a strategic work plan, which means there's going to be a whole lot of new things that are going to probably come out of that we're going to be looking to. And so, Gabriella, I so appreciate this is the perfect time to be having these conversations because this is just going to get harder, is not going to get easier. And in fact, one of the things that's very top of mind for me is getting the E-code back online and enhancing that E-code from a simplification and user quality perspective. That's likely a very significant project. I don't use as an example that I'm throwing that on the table today, but just as an example of, I think we're going to have things coming out of the strategic work plan and things we don't know today that are going to come up tomorrow that we're going to have to continue to manage. However the buckets look like or the categories look like, we're going to have to continue to manage those. So the last thing, Gabriella, is your point about continuing the conversation. I would very much appreciate that. I think it's really helpful. I found these discussions to be enlightening for me. So hopefully we can continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. And not only the conversation will continue, but I also have to thank the board for being open for these conversations because it's not always the case in all organizations. And I really think that we are all working together, and I need to understand where the board stands in terms of priorities, in terms of how they see the allocation of resources and etc. So this is very useful for all of us. And of course, the conversation will continue, and I hope it will continue very soon. John, please.
Thank you, Gabriella. I have a question, which I think is probably, well, because I'm relatively new to the board. We've said that we're going to do a lot of post-implementation reviews. Is that something which we are required to do under our terms of reference? Is it something which, if we were to decide today, well, actually, we're going to stop and not do any, that there would be consequences? It would just be useful to understand, is that even an option that's on the table?
I think that the response is or should be on a case-by-case basis. But in principle, the firms mostly, I would say, are asking for post-implementation reviews to be able to understand how the standards are working, how they are being applied and implemented, etc. On our side, it is important to do at least some of them because, for instance, the ones that are being undertaken, we need to understand where we are, to understand if we need to do something else, narrow scope amendments, delete the standard, or move forward with more adoption and implementation. We don't know. So this recurrently or continuously looking how how the standards look like depends very much on the PIR. That said, it's again a matter of priorities. If we think that some of them can hold, and Mark is saying we have 6 projects left in our strategy and work plan 24-27, and there is a plan or proposal that we might initiate all of them, we can and we should look at it and see what's the priority given what we have, what we are developing, our priorities, and what is necessary. So I think that formally we may delay some of them, but it depends on it is also a response to a request that we have been having to do some of the implementation reviews. The no-CLAR was clearly the one that everyone was telling us that we needed to do, and probably it was, very, very probably. So even the prioritization of the PIRs was based on market consultation and listening and etc. Sadia, sorry, Rania.
Okay, thank you. So I've been giving yesterday's discussion some thought, and I think Nancy framed it nicely. I mean, we were talking about prioritization, resources, we were talking about the way we do things. And I'm thinking that perhaps when we identify a project, it would be worthwhile for us at the outstart to set like the time frame. I mean, because when you set your deadline and I mean, for example, just giving you an example, we've been talking about the private equity project and realizing that speed is of the essence. And so it helps us approach our prioritization differently in the sense that this is something that needs to come out within that much time and no more, because otherwise we run the risk of, I mean, lagging behind the curve and so on and so forth. And so I think because exactly like what happened with sustainability, because with sustainability, the deadline was sort of clear to us and we had to work against the deadline and we had to we knew exactly, it helped us prioritize. We knew exactly, this is our priority, everything else will take a back seat because that is what the world is expecting of us. And so I think that moving forward, one way to approach prioritization would be to say, okay, fine, this is a project, this is how important it is, how urgent it is, this is the deadline, and then otherwise, because there are so many important things we can work on, and we run the risk of spreading our resources thin. And so perhaps, again, and I don't know if it's appropriate to say this, but as we look at our current projects, we may consider, for example, because this was an issue that was raised recurrently during the discussions, consider, for example, prioritizing or adding more resources to the PE project and maybe putting some other projects, like giving them somewhat of a backseat, not because they are not important, but because they are not as urgent. So.
That's exactly the purpose of this conversation, is that we get to a point where we understand where our scarce resources must be allocated at this time and in the future based on some criteria. So I would also, I heard some, not suggestions in terms of a concrete resource allocation yesterday, but if you have any suggestions, of course, in this context where we don't know, we haven't decided exactly where the priorities are, but some suggestions about, some thoughts about resource allocation will be also very, very welcome. Of course, we heard a lot about technology, and again, rightly enough, market is telling us you should work more on technology. You need to focus on that area, and I of course, I will not say no. And I think that the way I have been myself approaching this as chair of the board is very clearly tells the importance that I'm giving to this topic, and that we are giving to this topic. Still, I think that resource, before deciding on resource allocation, we need to understand exactly what for, because again, I'm a bit confused about these requests, these recurrent requests from the market, like work on technology, but we don't have any concrete requests. Maybe it's just a perception that there must be a lot of things to do and that we need to go deeper in the investigation and understanding what are the issues that namely the firms, but also the regulators and possibly the investors are facing, because this is also for the investors. So again, everything has to be tested against the ultimate public interests that each one of the areas and projects aims to serve. Tomayo, I think that I'm going to give you the floor because I think that you want to react to what I said.
Yes, thank you, Gabriela. Yes, totally. I agree. Oh, totally. On the technology part, as the chair, I want to agree on what Gabriela said. I fully agree that there's much to do on technology, but again, everybody is just worrying, and what is expected to do is not necessarily clear. Even for me, it's not clear. So I think we need to do a kind for this area. I think we need to do a expectation control, and everybody have to realize that, as mentioned, in the accounting and audit world, the game may totally change due to the evolution of the AI, and the EPAs are now required to change their profile, or not change, but upgrade their profile and more become expertise on the technology and AI. So the fundamental principles of the code doesn't change, but the competency required was something that will be changed. The other thing is when we talked about the AI ethics, but it's not exactly ethics. Ethics is adjective. So that kind of really expectation control will be required. But I really appreciate any actions that the board members or the public interest requires. We can put it in action. So any suggestion will be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tomoyo. Luigi, please.
Yeah, I think that there are different perspectives here, depending upon which problem we are considering. Because one thing is the prioritization of the project that has different criteria to be followed, and the most important criteria is the public interest, of course, of this project. But we also have to take into consideration the second perspective, which is the resource constraints. And I think this time, with the technology that we are able to use, of course, and to procure, to try to figure out the exact work or the expected workload of all resources that could be devoted to any activity of the board, including outreach activity, project, and so on, and trying to estimate these activity, allocated them in order to see which is the real capacity that we have. Because without this information, well, we could define the priorities, but again, we don't know where to stop or whether we have room to add further project there. It may be difficult, but I think that the board has the long experience in order to be able to perform these estimates and allocations. And the third matter, the third perspective is which type of technology or additional means we can use in order to improve this capacity. And to also improve the quality of certain activities. I think, well, probably there are additional perspective, I'm pretty sure, but thinking about these three, probably we may have a picture on the rooms that we have in order to, at the end, decide which project, how many, which type of activities, whether to go remote or in presence and so on. Because without this analysis, I think every decision it is the best decision we can take, but probably it is not the optimum that we can do.
Thank you very much, Luigi. Sadia, please.
I think the suggestion for the list to go back to the staff and think about which ones we should be cutting off is the right one. I think that the reason for cutting off projects should be as simple as we do not have resources at the moment, and stakeholders have not been asking for this for the last 3 to 4 years. It's as simple as that. We don't need to go back and reanalyze and ask the question. Because if you ask the question, should we do a project? There is going to be someone who says yes for every one of them, because everyone has favorites. On the PIR, and I note that there's still 4 PIRs out there. We cannot have PIR fatigue. So even if those ones stay on, you need to think about keeping it at a stepped process. And sometimes I have the same behavior that I would say, we'll do it, but we'll do it in 3 or 4 years' time. I don't think we're there because we brought on so many new items. We need to take off items, else we'll have an ongoing catch-up list.
Thank you very much, Sadia. David, please.
Thank you. I was just reflecting on yesterday and a lot of the comments that have been made today. And when we cite examples of pivoting, for example, we use the sustainability one quite a lot, and I can understand why. The one thing I would just like us to think a little bit more about is we talk about examples pre the current staff-led model. And that meant that a lot more board member resources got used than are being used today, or perhaps they're being used differently. So I think we need to think about that a little bit more, because I'm a bit worried that even if we talk about, well, before we had 4 projects, now we've got 4 projects, but the staffing model is very different. So I think we need to think about that a little bit more. And in the context of the staff, when I think about my days in financial accounting, and for example, doing a forecast on project management or a project that we were leading, there's always this level of baseline cost. And baseline cost means it's what are your baseline deliverables that no matter what happens, you have to deliver. And examples of that might be, what are the operational time requirements for staff that are just not negotiable? Whether that's learning and development, whether that's doing admin stuff, whatever it is, that's just not part of the mix you can consider for project allocation. And I think having some clarity about kind of the usable hours, again, I'm using these terms very loosely, versus the ones that are fixed and used already might be a helpful way to see what's available to pivot and what's not available to pivot. Because I think it would be helpful for that granularity. So I just wanted to call that out a little bit more, because I worry that we're not comparing apples to apples when we talk about some of these projects. The other thing I would suggest that we consider a little bit further, and I think I talked about this yesterday, is this idea of quick wins. How do we collaborate better with key partners? And I don't want to define who the partner is. It could be anybody that we think is appropriate, for example, to create NAM. So at the moment, we do all of the NAM creation. Can we work with partners to co-create? And that would do a couple of things. It would actually change the perception that some of our stakeholders have of us. It would see them being more inclusive, and therefore there's more of a vested interest in promoting and adopting as well. So I think we would get a couple of different kinds of wins, not just on the resource side, but also some of the public perception side with some of the stakeholders. The other thing I wanted to think about is, and I was reflecting on, was how we classify work. What makes it to an initiative versus a project, versus a quick win. So when I think about technology, for example, one of the things I wonder about is, would the demand from the market be as strong as it is, which is very vague and it's nebulous in the ask, it's just work more on technology. But what does that mean in terms of a concrete piece of output or a concrete piece of work? So I'm wondering if we were to do things like, I know we've got the podcast, for example, launch, but if we were to do more of these kinds of things, and again, collaboratively with others, would the perception still be the same that we're not doing enough? So maybe, again, that is another example of, can we do some smaller things, not big things, that perhaps, again, changes the view that we're not working enough on something. And if we co-collaborate, it, again, takes down the resource requirement, so more frequent but smaller outputs. And I think that ties back to something that Mark said at the very beginning, because I do agree with that, and Nancy talked about it with the heat map, is there really does need to be a set of criteria against which we assess priority. So whether that's scope, risk, impact, these kinds of things. And heat maps are a great way and a very visual way to show it, but you could use traffic lights. I mean, there are all kinds of ways. But it would really bring out the conversation to say, you know what, actually, when we consider it against these X criteria, just no, because then we'll know exactly what resource capacity we have. We'll know what the ask is, and we can then work on it. But it would also aid the conversation with James, which I know I can imagine is a tricky one, with James on new hires. So if there really is a demand for some of this and a resource is required, then it would also aid in a very concrete data-driven way to have that business case conversation. So just a few thoughts.
Thank you very much, David. And on new hires, I will remind again the board members about the need to think and explore and find good resources as secondments, as staff fellows. Thank you very much. Obituku, please. Obi, I don't know if you are speaking, but we can't hear you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I need to wait for the host to allow me on mute. Thank you, Chair. So I just have a few comments to make, and I just hope it's not too controversial. Based on the paper that was agenda that was shared for this session, I just have some few comments, like on the private equity and investment, ways to free up resources. I just feel that since we already did some things on that earlier, and from what they presented, most of the majority of the work is on research and information gathering. A consultant can be commissioned to do that part of the work to free up staff. Then I think that will reduce the number of staff that will be assigned there. Since it's just research and information gathering, which we already did, they can do it and then just review. Then also on IMAG, which is an important one, but since from the feedback we have, and we have stepped down the Part 4 and the Part 4B work stream, I think that it can be delayed till a year after the effective date, because that's when we have more information on what actually is the implementation gaps or issues. So instead of us being so overly reacting on small finds or little gaps, we just give it a 1 year gap from the day from December 2026, the effective date till 2027. Like December 2027, we'll have a better picture of a better picture of what needs to be done. Then that'll give us more direction instead of spending effort when we don't really have enough. Then on technology, my take is that since we already have a technology revision on the code, what we really need to do now is more of awareness, because as it seems that part of the code is not, people are not yet aware of that. So like David said, we can always co-create NAMs. From what I saw, there was NAM for each quarter. I don't think that in order to free up resources, the podcasts we are doing and all such things, I think that they also help in building awareness and creating capacity. So I think what we are doing is quite okay. And then based on all that we've heard during this board meeting, we see there's a big need for adoption and implementation. And that is where we have to be very strategic in all we are doing. Then the work streams that we have not yet commenced. So when you go, I feel we should reassess and reschedule. But based on the strategic work stream survey that was done, you see that most of the topics in the ones we're yet to commence for this period are not featuring there. It's only the non-assurance service and fees. It was even ranking, I think it was the lowest rank in what was featuring in the survey that was done. So I think we should just reassess and reschedule that for maybe the next not this year, but maybe in the next strategy period or so, we just reschedule and assess. So that's just my few comments or suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Obi. Amajit?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I would not repeat, what I said yesterday, but just to pick up 2 points. One is the co-creation. I think I was also referring to the same yesterday, where I was mentioning that if you could have an expert committee from the firms or from whoever is the relevant people from the market, and they can work with us in developing implementation materials. They can help us in capacity building space. And David's idea of NAM also to co-create with market participants, I think no harm in exploring it, but I'll just advise to be having some guardrails around it. We need to keep that process. I mean, the outcome has to be very thoroughly reviewed independently at our end, before we give it a green signal. So that was one. And second was on the, just to reiterate, I think we seriously need to think of more allocation of resources on promotion of adoption and implementation vis-a-vis standard setting going forward.
Thank you very much, Amajit. Nancy, you had your 10th cut up. Okay, I don't see any other board members wanting to make comments. Ken, James, anything on your side?
Very briefly, Chair, and that's really just maybe to elaborate a little bit on John's earlier question around when the board ought to undertake post-implementation reviews, or PIRs as we call them. Essentially, there are two dimensions to that sort of board direction on PIRs. One is ordinarily when the board finalizes a standard, it makes an assessment as to whether, given the substance of the standard and the import of it and impact, etc., whether it would be important to essentially undertake a PIR. So that was a commitment, for example, that the board made in relation to the no-clause standard, to the non-assurance standards, to the group audit standards. These are very substantive and far-reaching standards. The ESA as well, the sustainability standards. So clear decision there, and we factor that into the development of the strategy and work plan. Secondly, the PIR is actually an element of due process. There is a specific provision in the due process and working procedures integrated with the public interest framework, and that has a specific reference to post-implementation reviews as being a part of the process of informing the board's consideration of the need for a standard setting project. So just really additional information to help the board understand that aspect.
Thank you. Maybe a couple of quick fire points. We're going to think about our immediate resource allocations and our priorities on PI and technology. It's the discipline and the back lack of a better word, education, but it's the practices of the board that we're going to get experience with when we go into our strategy and work program. So you're absolutely right. Let's start now. We're going to develop toolkits that are going to help us make decisions and inform us. Immediately, we might have some opportunities. The big one, well, how do we look at the forward strategy, apply these tools, and then have that on a going forward basis? So I agree, this is really just leading us up to the big question of strategy and work program allocations. The second point I just want to say is, I mean, it's very hard to say we're going to stop. I think it's also very hard to say no. So we get a lot, we say yes more than no, obviously, right? And we get 18 different or 16 different ideas, and they say, we agree with these 3 priorities, but also this one. So saying no, there's a saying I had is, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And so really, really trying to not add on. One of the ways in which we can do that, and I think our practices to date have said, here's our list of priorities, or these are areas of relevance to the public interest and our stakeholders. Then we assign and try and balance out resources so that all of them they start to move. But you can take a simple one on an order of priority and you say, what's that project? How big of a tank is it of gas? We're going to fill up that tank with our resource to deliver it and move on down the list. At some point, you're going to be out of gas. That's when you know where your resources are off and you're, as you said, the ones that are important and the ones that have to wait. Very simple in terms of a process. And then finally, I just want to be very careful about this leveraging other fallacy. It never comes at zero cost. It comes sometimes at more cost than if we've done it ourselves. So it's really picking your partners very carefully, selectively using those, and then allocating resources to have that accomplished. Because I mean, working with a partner doesn't guarantee that it's not going to be a difficult, time-consuming, iterative process, and it can come in front of the boards. And never underestimate the fallacy of free resource. I mean, the board always has to know what's coming on. We'll always have the say on quality, and it's very difficult to find international partners. You can find national partners, but it's very difficult to find international partners. So staff often have a heavy role to play in internationalizing a national partners initiative. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ken and James. So very rich discussion once again. I would not say that we have reached a conclusion, but I think that we have here very good material to proceed with a very careful reflection about how to approach this and come back to the board with some kind of designed approach to the strategy of this board, of resource allocation, etc. There are a few elements that we will still need to take back and consider, namely against budget, namely against room and etc. We will need to come back to this against the results of the strategy and work plan survey as well later in September, because there are already some indications, although we need to take these responses careful in terms of clear indications for the future, because these responses, as we have seen, are a little bit nuanced. They sometimes may mean a lot for one of the boards and less so to the other board. So we need to be careful about the conclusions that we take, but of course some high-level ideas can be taken from this survey. We will have to see what to do, Mark, and thank you for bringing it again. We will need to think to see what to do with the remaining projects that are still on our current strategy and work plan, and look into 2027 and decide what are the burning platforms, what are the things that we cannot really do, and if we can really take all these projects on board. Nancy, this idea of a heat map, I think that I like it a lot. Of course, as we have been saying, this also takes resources, but I like that. And I like the idea that we should have some elements there that might, even if we should not be rigid in that respect, might drive us and make us understand where we are putting our cards and our resources. Ultimately, it's the public interest that matters, but there are some elements that we sometimes have less clear in our mind as being important, such as David mentioned it, risk. And sometimes risk it's not as visible as other elements when we make a decision about should we move forward, should we move fast, boldly, slower, is there a real risk, a burning risk in front of us or not? So that's something that we may also consider going forward as a way of monitoring and orienting our strategic direction and strategic allocation of resources. So I'm not going to promise anything. If we, after the discussion that we will need to have on this rich discussion, conclude that it would be good to have a conversation with the board before the September board meeting, of course, we will suggest that. We know that summer is coming. In some parts of the world, July and August are not exactly the best months, but I don't think that we can stop anyway. So if necessary, we will propose something. Otherwise, we will come back in September with a structured proposal of how to address strategy, priorities, and resources. Okay, and I think that's it for. Thank you very much. This was really. I must say, I don't like to rank the topics as more important or less important, but this was definitely one of the highlights of this meeting for me as chair of the board, because I needed this conversation and I needed to see where you as board members are with respect to these topics. And I think it's going to be very useful going forward to build on everything that we heard here. So with this, I will close the public session, not before saying a few words. Can I see you wanting to say something?
Well, it's the most important item on the agenda, Chair, and that's the approval of the minutes.
Of course. Ken, I'll leave it. I'll leave it for you. I was going to do it on the next session, but okay.
Well, yes, so the updated version of the public session minutes of the board in March has been circulated. Really just editorial fine-tuning changes. So if the board is comfortable with those changes, we would just maybe a quick show of hands if the board is comfortable with the minutes. Okay, so the board minutes are approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken, and thank you very much to everyone who contributed or simply read the minutes. I would like, before we finish, before I say my final words, I'd like to note that this is Yohei's last meeting. Yohei has been with us as a public observer from the Japanese FSA. We have been representatives of the Japanese FSA for a few years already. Yohei has been with us with a few years, I think 2 or 3, making very good contributions, being a very good fellow, and importantly, bridging the board with the JFSA, which is a very important stakeholder, and having also some funny moments with us. I want to remember his skills as a baseball player. Sorry, baseball, yeah. Bowling, yes, it was bowling, which was really surprising. So, Yohei, thank you very much. We will miss you very much, but we hope to keep on meeting you and crossing with you over the next times, given our very close relationship with the JFSA, and imagining that you will stay with JFSA, I'm sure that we will keep on crossing. Thank you so much. We very much appreciate your participation and your collaboration to this board, and I would like to thank you. And finally, ask Philip for his, if Philip wants some final words about what this meeting was and how it resonated to the PIOB, any advice, any takeaways?
Thank you, Gabriela. As you know, it has been my first observation of an IESBA meeting. So I will go back to Europe with a very positive impression. I was really impressed by the quality of the discussions, and notably by the way each board member is involved, committed, and pays attention to, which is not so easy during 4 days and almost 7 hours a day. So congratulations for that, because I know that in the context of diversity, not to say different versions of truth, like Mark, but it's not easy to reach a consensus and to design a path for the satisfaction of all the members. So I really admire your commitment, and I think that it's an organization which requires some strong dedication. And I think that under the leadership of Gabriela and the staff, it's something which progresses very well for the satisfaction of the public interest, I would say, and congratulations for that. And not good luck today.
Thank you very much, Philippe. I need the good luck that you are wishing me, but also the support of the PIOB to bring this challenge and this boat where it should be. So thank you very much, Philippe. You were very welcome. I'm happy to know that you were happy with the way the meeting went. I know it's a different world, and when people think that this is similar to other I think that what our mandate, our approach, and the dynamic of this board is very unique. So maybe at the start you were a little bit surprised, but I'm happy that at the end you were pleased about how things went. Okay, so well, of course, I need to thank everyone for this amazing 4 days. As Philip said and noted, everyone very attentive, very committed, very engaged. I think that we continue growing as a board, and the fact that everyone around the table has speaking rights in fact and not in the paper, and that everyone feels comfortable, feels open and to discussion, committed, contributing, prepared, which is very, very important, because that's something that I noted very much in this board, is that everyone was very well prepared for the discussions. And this makes not only my life easier, but it makes the discussions and the outputs much more meaningful. So thank you for that. I think it was really an excellent meeting. I'm not going to wrap up or summarize everything that we did this week, but of course we had important decisions. The real formal decision was to approve the terms of reference of the private equity investment project, which is, it's just the terms of reference, but means a lot, because it's really the formal start of something that we all agree that we need to do. We landed somewhere in a direction from the board to the FCG project in terms of how to progress with the project and with the framework development in terms of location, approach, and etc. It was a really important decision. Of course, I recognize that at the start not everyone was on the same page, and that we started with a very or slightly dispersed and different approaches around the table. But of course, decision-making process in a collective body goes exactly this way. We start somewhere, and then we start narrowing against the majority of the positions, and finding a way of getting together around something, which was exactly what happened. So I'm very thankful and grateful to the board members for the openness to evolve and progress in this respect also as it happened, knowing that some of you, and recognizing that some of you would have preferred a different outcome, and we will have that in mind as we go forward. That's not something that will be deleted from the history of the project. That will have to be kept in mind as we develop this framework and understand that there are some concerns or preferences that we need to give some consideration while deciding what this is going to be at the end. Well, technology, we had a very good presentation, and we are CFOs. It was just an interim report, which almost led us to some conclusions that probably will inform the September decision or report and recommendations to the board. And this strategic, and then we had the TRV, SMART, and all these things, adoption and implementation, sustainability decision not to move forward. So Mark, this responds to your question about if we are able to stop something. Yes, we are, and this will continue. So sustainability will not continue based on the data that we don't have that support the idea that we should be doing something else. We had the SMART presentation this morning, very promising and very enlightening about how we are progressing as a board. And of course, these conversations around strategy and resource allocation, which, as I said, was probably one of the most important for me as chair of the board to help me and help us set the way forward. Thank you so much for this. Thank you very much to the staff for the, again, amazing work done in preparing all the documents and what was not in the documents, but it was in the discussions to make this meeting so successful. Special word to Astrid and Diana for making this meeting happen this way, with perfectly seamlessly, knowing that this office will not be available from, and then if you go upstairs, you'll see how it looks like. So we are really working with the minimum in terms of in terms of assets, in terms of instruments, and etc., which makes their lives even more difficult. So thank you, Stu and Diana, for the amazing work done, and of course to IFAC to providing us with the logistics and even with some people who are always assisting with the IT systems and the catering and all these things. So very grateful to everyone. The next board meeting will be held in September 14 to 18. It's going to be a 5 days board meeting, right, Ken? In Madrid. So we are. This is our year to go somewhere. And going forward, we will need to see how we will manage these board meetings with not having this space anymore and needing to make other decisions, but not for now. And I don't know if Ken, you want to say anything else? You have any final words or recommendations or whatever?
No, it's really just to encourage board members to really make the arrangements for September. Your flights, make sure you have your hotel booked, because it's my understanding is this is the weekend of the Formula One racing. So really just we want to make sure that you're not going to be camping out in a tent somewhere out in Madrid. But otherwise, we look forward to seeing you all in Madrid.
Thank you very much. Yes, looking forward to seeing you in Madrid. We will continue with an executive session, which I guess will be short, I suspect. I don't know if I dare suggesting that we do it before lunch, but maybe not.
No, we do have a planning committee meeting over lunch right now. So I would suggest we break for lunch for 1 hour, and then we'll reconvene at 1:45 for the executive session.
Okay.